Although I lack divine power, my mastery of the laws has reached the foundational level. Not bad. Once I absorb the power of the spatial crystal, I should reach the limits of this world's combat strength. Jian Wushuang felt quite satisfied. This was the advantage of having a supreme treasure, of course, provided that the treasure was unique enough. If it were an ordinary treasure, no matter how much one of the deities from this world's divine aspect realm tried, they wouldn't be able to attain it. However, the 9-prison pagoda was different. It allowed even a small cultivator who had fallen from the divine aspect realm to control it and utilize its inherent power. This was truly extraordinary. But this alone wasn't enough to surprise Jian Wushuang. Now, he had been inside the 9-prison pagoda for a day, and his countless avatars had already spread out in all directions. Each avatar's thought power covered a range of 1 billion miles. With 10,000 avatars, they covered 1 trillion miles, yet they still couldn't find the boundary of the first layer. This place seemed like a world without borders. Jian Wushuang had no choice but to send some weaker avatars to search for the boundary, while his main avatar remained in place. His physical body had also almost finished refining, looking exactly like him, bronzed skin and sharp, chiseled features, all exuding a fierce aura. Now, let's try controlling the 9-prison pagoda and send out the physical body. I wonder how Xianxia and the others are doing. Jian Wushuang wasn't sure if the flow of time within the 9-prison pagoda differed from that of the outside world, which made him worried. He was concerned about Xianxia's safety. Buzz. As the thought arose, he began to comprehend the laws of the first layer of this world. According to his calculations, a cultivator of the divine aspect realm could control it, so with his current soul power, it should be effortless. However, after comprehending several laws, his soul still couldn't control the 9-prison pagoda. What's going on? Jian Wushuang frowned. He had already comprehended several laws, and by all accounts, he should have become the master of these laws. Moreover, the laws here weren't simple. They were comparable to those of the Qinghua realm in the past. Yet, he still couldn't control the 9-prison pagoda. He didn't need much. Just to master the first layer would be enough. Interesting. I underestimated this 9-prison pagoda. This difficulty exceeds my expectations. Its range is comparable to a high-level world, and I still haven't found the boundary. However, the further I go, the weaker the spatial power becomes. Its limit is probably only about the size of the human realm in the 4 great secret realms of the past, but the laws here are much stronger than those of a typical original universe. They've already touched the level of time and space. How did Immortal Zhouchen inherit this 9-prison pagoda in the first place? The more Jian Wushuang thought about it, the more perplexed he became. He could only find out by asking Immortal Zhouchen directly. However, at this moment, he still believed that Zhouchen had already fallen, which left him utterly puzzled. Forget it. Since I can't master the first layer in a short time, I'll break open a small hole at the edge and send my physical body out. When I scour everything, I'm sure I'll find some clues. Jian Wushuang did not delve deeper into the matter. His main avatar, along with his physical body, began to head toward a weak spot in the space. Even if he couldn't fully control the 9-prison pagoda, he could use burning thought power to break through the first layer of weak space and send his physical body out. As long as his physical body could leave, the remaining main avatar would stay behind to continue comprehending, ensuring that nothing would be delayed. Yes, I'll choose this spot. Jian Wushuang halted his movements. From the outside, this place didn't seem much different from any other, but the space here was indeed weaker. He only needed to burn a bit of soul power to pierce through. Soul burning. Ha! Jian Wushuang formed his hand into a claw. Even though it wasn't divine power he was burning, the fierce claw technique still caused the surrounding space to tremble instantly. With a single tear, the sky-shattering claw broke the space apart, but it didn't shatter the external space. However, it did leave a claw mark behind. Within the deep, crisscrossing claw marks, a few specks of starlight could be seen. That was light from the outside world. Go! In an instant, Jian Wushuang's physical body transformed into a clear, crystalline stream of water. Following those tiny stars, he left the 9-prison pagoda in an instant. Outside, Xianxia, who was carrying the 9-prison pagoda, suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He quickly threw down the pagoda and retreated in a hurry. This action confused the others, who turned to look at the 9-prison pagoda, only to find their mouths gaping open in shock. Except for Xianxia, who had initially been the most worried. But now that he saw the water stream surging out, his face lit up with joy. The others, who had lived their whole lives in this mundane world, were powerful beings themselves, referred to as upper immortals, but their vision was much more limited. Such divine techniques weren't even recorded in ancient legacies. The water stream shot out and instantly condensed into the appearance of Jian Wushuang, identical to the person they had seen before. However, they stared at him in disbelief, their faces filled with fear. It was Xianxia who broke the silence, hurrying forward to ask, "Brother Wushuang, have you regained your strength?" Such a transformation of form at least required one to reach the immortal stage. This stage encompassed both the Yen Immortal and Great Yen Immortal, as well as the Tao Lords. Xianxia assumed Jian Wushuang had regained his strength to the immortal level, which meant he could take him along for the ride. In fact, his assumption wasn't wrong. Jian Wushuang had indeed reached the immortal stage, but unfortunately, only his soul power had reached that level. However, without a suitable physical body, it was impossible to bear the soul power of the immortal stage. The growth of the physical body couldn't be separated from law, wealth, companions, and land, bringing him back to square one. "Everyone, don't you recognize me?" Jian Wushuang's lips curled into a smile, and his aura spread out in an instant. However, it didn't target the crowd, but instead swept through all the surrounding life forms, checking if anyone was watching them. This time, his thought power coverage could extend to a limit of 500 miles, a tenfold increase. The only unfortunate part was that when his physical body left the 9-prison pagoda, it had absorbed quite a few space crystals from the fissures, preventing him from reaching the peak of the nascent soul stage or even the divine form stage. Instead, he remained in the middle of the nascent soul stage. This was somewhat disappointing, as he had initially planned to come out and immediately take control of this world. However, it wasn't a significant issue. The soul power within his current physical body had already surpassed the divine form stage. Burning divine power was enough to rival a cultivator of the divine form stage, and this world posed no substantial threat to him. Moreover, his main avatar was still inside the 9-prison pagoda. Even if he burned soul power, he could instantly replenish it. With this, he could burn soul power at will. This soul-burning secret technique is really useful. Once I regain my strength, I must study this soul-burning technique, Jian Wushuang pondered in his heart. Outwardly, he spoke to the others about his experiences. Since their knowledge was limited, he didn't go into too much detail, only mentioning that he had been trapped in the 9-prison pagoda and had obtained an ancient legacy, eventually breaking through to the middle of the nascent soul stage and successfully escaping the 9-prison pagoda. He wasn't deceiving them. If he said too much, they wouldn't understand anyway. As for Xianxia, Jian Wushuang didn't hide much from him, only sending him a brief transmission, indicating that he was now invincible in the mortal realm and could roam freely as he pleased. Even if they went straight to Tian City now, there would be no concerns. However, when he mentioned returning to Tian City, everyone unanimously opposed it. Even Xianxia expressed that there was no need to return now. At this moment, Chen Yuan stepped forward to explain, "Senior Wushuang, you may not know this since you just came out. A few days ago, we captured a dying cultivator from the Qiang sect. From him, we learned that there is an altar hidden underground in Mongshan County, containing a great secret." "Oh, is that so?" Jian Wushuang looked doubtful. It wasn't that he didn't believe Chen Yuan, but rather that he didn't trust certain people. For example, the Holy Maiden of the Centipede tribe. Ever since she learned that he had reached the mid-nascent soul stage, her gaze had been evasive, clearly indicating that there were things she hadn't told Chen Yuan, and she was likely conspiring with Yang Xiao. However, Jian Wushuang could tell that Yang Xiao didn't know as much as the Holy Maiden. His gaze turned to the Holy Maiden of the Centipede tribe, and in an uncompromising tone, he said, "I don't care what relationship or cooperation you have with Wei Zhouxian. I just want to know what your goal is. This. Xianxia was the first to step forward and plead. Senior, you and the commander must also have some sort of cooperative relationship, right? Since we're all on the same side, we all have our own secrets. Why push for answers? Heh! Jian Wushuang turned his head to look at Xianxia, amused. Xianxia, are you really unaware of the centipede tribe's affairs? In truth, he didn't know either. He was merely trying to bluff the other party. After all, the situation with the Jiang kingdom wasn't yet clear, and he didn't want to burn bridges at this time. Xianxia was obviously stunned by this statement, but then he resolutely said, "The centipede holy maiden saved my life, and she cooperates with the commander. I don't want to know more than that." She saved your life? At this moment, Xiangyang sneered. Xianxia, don't forget that it was Brother Wushuang who saved your life. He saved everyone. These words naturally solidified their stance. Chan Yuan was the same. He was a middleman, and his journey to Mongshan County was related to a matter that concerned him. However, everyone else was focused on the holy maiden of the centipede tribe's goal. Everyone, that is, except for the oblivious Xianxia, who thought that she had saved his life and was eager to repay her. If I don't tell you, will you take action, senior? The centipede holy maiden asked angrily. Jian Wushuang simply shook his head and calmly replied, "Whatever you did to that demon sect cultivator earlier, I will do to you." Soul search. This technique was far too simple. Once a soul search was performed, all secrets would be revealed. Previously, Jian Wushuang's strength hadn't been enough, and with powerful figures watching them from the shadows, he hadn't intended to search Yang Zhao's soul. But now things were different. He had the strength, and there were no prying eyes around. He could freely search souls. He would uncover the truth about the Jiang kingdom, and he would also learn the centipede holy maiden's purpose in Mongshan County. He was just pondering whether to act so ruthlessly in front of Jiang Shang. If she obediently confessed, he was willing to believe her. For a moment, the situation was at an impasse. Jiang Shang's gaze was clear, and he tried several times to speak, but the words never left his lips. Upon witnessing this scene, Jian Wushuang's heart softened, and he spoke calmly. "I'll give you a chance. Tell me what's inside the altar beneath Mongshan County. I won't concern myself with anything else. This benefits everyone, except for the centipede saintess." Among everyone present, only the centipede saintess knew what lay within the altar. This time, Xianxia didn't insist on protecting her. Instead, he tried to persuade her. "Saintess, this matter concerns the billions of people in the Tang dynasty. Please reveal it. It will also allow Senior Wushuang and the others to prepare in advance. Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand." The centipede saintess responded with a bitter smile, her eyes even carrying a trace of mockery. It was as if she were looking at a group of monkeys. "What do you mean?" Jian Wushuang didn't immediately grasp her meaning, for it had been too long since anyone dared speak to him this way. Could it be that this centipede saintess was an illegitimate child of a star spirit? If that were the case, she might indeed know more than Jian Wushuang. But the likelihood of this happening was as slim as Jian Wushuang being a failure. How could a failure possibly cultivate to possess the battle power of a 9-star universe god? Clearly, this wasn't possible. Just speak. Whether we understand or not is none of your concern, and you don't have to worry about whether I believe you. My thought power is strong. You should have witnessed this. Thought power reflects mental strength, so you can't lie to me. Jian Wushuang remained unhurried. After giving her some reassurance, he casually shrank the 9-prison pagoda and began playing with it in his hand. Although he couldn't control its interior, he could still manipulate its exterior with ease. He just couldn't store it within himself. Fortunately, his current physical body was a type of spatial special life form. Even a single drop of his blood contained a small space, albeit not large. However, placing a small 9-tiered pagoda inside was quite simple. The centipede saintess cast a deep glance at everyone present. This irritated Xiangyang, who was impatient by nature. Just as he was about to lose his temper, Jian Wushuang held him back. Yang Xiao and Jiang Shang believed that what she was about to reveal involved secrets of ancient cultivators. Although they were anxious, they patiently waited for her to speak. Only Chun Yuan seemed utterly indifferent. He wasn't a cultivator and had no interest in the secrets of cultivators. However, he did harbor a secret of his own, one so significant that it could shock the entire Tang dynasty. To him, whatever the centipede saintess said, no matter how earth-shattering, paled in comparison to his own secret. This matter needs to be traced back to ancient times. The centipede saintess sighed deeply. Her eyes showed no nostalgia, only a sense of melancholy. From her words, everyone learned the name of this world. Red-Eyed Realm. This world was called the Red-Eyed Realm. Upon hearing this name, everyone felt a sense of astonishment. Jian Wushuang, however, was calculating whether this Red-Eyed Realm had any connection to the Red Sun sect. Xiangyang felt no surprise. Instead, he was full of disdain. He couldn't care less about the name of such a small world. The centipede saintess, with mockery and pride in her eyes, continued, "You might not know much about the realms between worlds. Let me explain it this way. The Red-Eyed Realm is one of the weakest worlds. Do you know where those who have shattered the void go? The upper realm." Yang Xiao answered honestly. This was something the immortal Zhu Chun had mentioned earlier. Repeating it now didn't make him seem ignorant. However, his answer only provoked a bout of laughter from the centipede saintess. Even a 3-year-old knows there is an upper realm. But do you know what the upper realm is called? What races live there? What kinds of cultivators exist, and how powerful they are? You don't know. Without waiting for a rebuttal, she immediately dismissed everyone's understanding. No wonder she was so arrogant. It seems she truly knew some secrets. The upper realm consists of 72 ancient domains. Each domain is countless times larger than the Red-Eyed Realm. Even a cultivator at the divine form realm, relying on flight alone, would never be able to cross a single ancient domain, not even if they lived their entire lifespan. You should know that in the lower realms, a cultivator at the divine form realm can live for several thousand years. In the upper realm, they live even longer. Yet, crossing the Red-Eyed Realm for a divine form realm cultivator only takes a month. Can you now grasp how vast the ancient domains are? The centipede saintess smiled smugly. Her bronze-colored eyebrows arched high. Good heavens! Chun Yuan was utterly stunned. As a mere scholar, he had always believed that this world was vast enough. In his understanding, there was no higher realm. He thought such tales were deceitful. Even if a higher realm did exist, he assumed it wouldn't be much stronger than the Red Eyes realm. Yang Xiao felt the same, his eyes widening with a strong sense of longing. His path of cultivation was both peculiar and extreme. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to escape from the hands of 9 Golden Core experts and even kill several of them. Jiang Shang, still young and with limited knowledge, was equally astonished. She felt as if she had been viewing the sky from the bottom of a well. She never imagined that the upper realm could be so magnificent. She had been following in her mother's footsteps, searching for her mother's whereabouts, though after all this time, she had only managed to gather a few clues. Her entire cultivation path had been guided by her mother. She had never once pondered the wonders of the cultivation world on her own. Now, hearing about the grandeur of the upper realm, her thoughts began to stir. She envisioned a scene where she would find her mother, and the two of them would ascend together. Jian Wushuang stood there, his face filled with melancholy. He remained silent, showing little expression. Only Xiangyang sat on the ground, his usual carefree demeanor intact, still holding his stomach. "Brother Wushuang, aren't you overwhelmed by the vastness of this world?" Xiangyang stifled a laugh, looking at Jian Wushuang with a serious expression as he asked, "In such a massive world, there must be universe masters, right? It's simply terrifying." Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and interrupted, "Enough, stop messing around. But this has nothing to do with Mongshan County. Grand narratives, anyone can tell them. I could even talk about the realm god continent." Xiangyang shouted, raising his voice. Indeed, grand narratives were something anyone could speak of. In their understanding, even the realm god continent wasn't much. Then there was the starry sky, which was even larger, so vast that it made mortals despair. But what did that matter? That world had already left them far behind. Jian Wushuang felt this way as well, which was why he seemed so melancholic. They once had that splendid world. Xianxia paused for a moment, the mockery in his eyes slowly turning into reminiscence. What are these two whispering about? The thousand-legged saintess glanced at Xianxia curiously. The others, however, were somewhat confused, as Xiangyang's recent words made even less sense to them. At least the thousand-legged saintess's narration had explanations and comparisons that allowed them to directly feel the power of the upper realm. Yang Xiao, feeling a bit excited, gently urged, "Saintess, please continue." Brother Xiangyang is a recluse. It's normal for him to say some odd things after being surprised. This remark deeply hurt Xiangyang's heart. Just as he was about to retort, Jian Wushuang interrupted him. "There's no need. You are a universe master." After explaining the structure of the upper realm, the thousand-legged saintess began talking about a legend. This was all a prelude. It was said that the upper realm once had 108 ancient domains, of which 36 were shattered, transforming into countless small worlds. The Crimson Eye domain was one of them. Upon hearing this, everyone except Jian Wushuang and Xiangyang revealed astonished expressions. This time, no one interrupted, and the thousand-legged saintess continued. After the ancient domains shattered, they became countless worlds. The Crimson Eye domain emerged from this, but as the ancient domains broke, their power slowly dwindled. The more cultivators there are, the less power this world has. "I see." Yang Xiao and Jiang Shang revealed identical expressions. This matter wasn't exactly a big secret, and many should already know. Jian Wushuang and Xiangyang had long been aware that the power of this world was waning. In no time it would turn into a purely mundane world. But even mundane worlds have long lifespans. Perhaps after 100,000 or 1,000,000 years, when the power of life is exhausted, even mortals will vanish. Even the plants and beasts would perish, the world collapsing into the void. The world would be destroyed. But for mortals, that was far too distant. This matter had already spread during ancient times. Back then, cultivators were obsessed with cultivation, even giving rise to many demon sections. They slaughtered each other, reducing competition to achieve ascension. During that era, a Crimson Eye appeared, changing everything. An eye. Upon hearing those two words, Jian Wushuang thought of the ancient token. But he didn't ask directly. This time he truly listened. The more he listened, the more astonished he became. A small cultivator in a mundane world telling a legend could shock a superpowerhouse with the strength of a 9-star universe god. Xiangyang thought he was going mad. Substance is the foundation. The foundation is this world. What encompasses this world? It's a bigger world. Beyond the bigger world, there are even bigger worlds, but the essence is the starry sky. That's the power of the starry sky, Jian Wushuang muttered, making Xiangyang think he had gone mad. But Jian Wushuang just smiled indifferently. The thousand-legged saintess on the other side wasn't lying. He could see that. Whether the legend was true or not, he needed to verify it himself. "Brother Wushuang, what did you hear that surprised you so much?" Xiangyang couldn't help but ask through a voice transmission. Jian Wushuang, however, spoke directly. "What the thousand-legged saintess just mentioned, the Divine Eye secret technique, which allows one to enhance strength in realm without absorbing the power of the Crimson Eye domain. I find it very interesting. Why not share your thoughts as well? A world is like a pool of water. The Crimson Eye domain is clearly a stagnant pool, while the 72 ancient domains of the upper realm are like a river. Even if the people living by the river drink as they please, they can't finish it, because the water just flows by their doorstep." His analogy was apartment. This time, Xiangyang finally understood. He exclaimed in shock, "This inheritance secret technique is truly defying the heavens, going against fate. You can't say that. As far as I know, although the Crimson Eye domain is a stagnant pool, what if a strong person is willing to add water?" Jian Wushuang speculated. Xiangyang first nodded seriously, then shook his head. Impossible. If water could be added, the power of those cultivators who died in the mutual slaughter would have returned to the pool. But according to what the thousand-legged saintess said, the power of those cultivators who were killed did not return. They only killed to prevent their opponents from continuing to absorb the power of the Crimson Eye domain. You're right. But those people were too weak. Jian Wushuang shook his head. If he hadn't obtained the 9-prison pagoda, he might have believed it. Moreover, when he first entered this place, he encountered those demonic creatures, all of whom were universe gods with the combat strength of 6 or 7 stars. The upper limit of this world was far from as simple as Xianxia imagined. Besides, he had also dreamed of the prophet, a person who could vanish from others' memories. A universe master could already create a universe. Activating a universe was also easy, though the probability was low. Aside from the divine eye secret technique mentioned by the thousand-legged saintess, the Crimson Eye domain had nothing special. If one came for the secret technique, it was indeed possible. But this kind of secret technique was for mundane cultivators. Even if it were taken by an emperor or even a universe master, what use would it be? Could they really create a heaven-defying secret technique? If they could create it, allowing them to skip over a river and absorb the power of an ocean, wouldn't that be redundant? The power absorbed ultimately belonged to the starry sky. Although it wasn't of much use, the person who created this secret technique intrigued Jian Wushuang. If possible, once he regained all his strength, he would reverse time and space to witness firsthand how that person crafted such a technique. As he pondered this, Jian Wushuang recalled that his original task was related to the underground altar in the Mongshan County. Could this have something to do with the God Eye secret technique? After all, given how long this had been building up, if there was no connection, it would be quite absurd. It would be a waste of time. The centipede saintess spoke again. But this time, she had lost much of her earlier arrogance. Jian Wushuang's earlier analogy and hypothesis were indeed things she had never heard before. Let me put it this way. The reason the Red Eye Realm is called the Red Eye Realm is because of the God Eye secret technique. However, the God Eye secret technique originated from the God Eye clan, and it not only appears in the Red Eye Realm but also exists in the Upper Realm. However, in ancient inheritances, only the matters related to the God Eye secret technique are recorded, and there is little mention of the God Eye clan itself. However, the Red Eye Realm is different. The inheritance of the God Eye in the Red Eye Realm is unlike any other world, or rather, it is more powerful. It is even stronger than the ancient domains of the Upper Realm. According to the records, the inheritance of the God Eye secret technique is divided into 7 levels. The first level is the simplest. One only needs to be innately gifted to obtain a Black Pupil God Eye token. With this token, one can go to the Northern Region Glacier and pass the first level of the test to receive the inheritance. At this point, Xiangyang couldn't help but urge, "You should get to the point about Mongshan County. If you keep going off topic, you'll just be wasting everyone's time. It's fine. Just speak at your own pace. No need to rush." Jian Wushuang interjected, causing Xiangyang to fall silent once more. The others were also not in a hurry. After all, it was like listening to a story. They naturally wanted to know more details. Otherwise, where was the appeal? Unfortunately, the story had already reached its end. The centipede saintess spoke with a tone of regret. "Many years ago, an ancestor of our clan obtained a 4th-level token and passed the test set by the God Eye clan. He successfully received the inheritance. With this inheritance, he quickly reached the peak of the divine image realm. Just as the ancestor was about to make a breakthrough and ascend to the upper realm, he was ambushed by a despicable person who used a secret technique to seize his body. However, the ancestor had a contingency plan in place. Using the Heaven's Foot blood shield, he fought the attacker to a draw, with both losing their physical bodies and power. The power lost could not dissipate on its own due to the nature of the God Eye secret technique. But because that power was so immense, others could not absorb it either. In the end, the clan's strongmen sealed it, hoping to wait for the ancestor to recover and reclaim his lost power. Yet, unexpectedly, the ancestor ultimately couldn't hold on. Although this event had taken place a millennium ago, the Chenzu saintess still felt sorrowful. as her tribe had almost produced an ascendant. What a great honor that would have been. Everyone present began to realize the significance of what she had just said. You mean to say that the altar beneath Mongshan County holds the power sealed by your ancestors? That's right. This time I've come to reclaim that sealed power. I forgot to mention, it was the ancestor of the Tang dynasty who sealed this power 1,000 years ago, the Chenzu Saintess added. This statement sparked a chain of thoughts in Jian Wushuang's mind. The Tang dynasty ancestor? Wasn't that the monk from Baoguang Temple? He had sealed the power of the 1,000-foot tribe's ancestor, and now, due to the current Tang emperor, it was reappearing in Mongshan County. There was a conspiracy behind this. Jian Wushuang couldn't fully comprehend it yet. He glanced at Xiangyang and Jiang Shang, then said, "In that case, let's not hesitate any longer. We'll head straight to Mongshan County. Better to be cautious. I've already informed the elders of my tribe. They will arrive outside Mongshan County soon, and it won't be too late to enter the city together then." The Chenzu Saintess expressed her concern. Meanwhile, Yang Xiao was fiddling with a token by his side. It was obvious he was summoning reinforcements. He reported everything to the chief commander and then dispatched people for support. The power at the peak of the divine phase was enough to drive all cultivators mad. The 1,000-foot tribe had collaborated with Wei Jiuxian precisely to reclaim this power, allowing the tribe's experts to break through to the peak of the divine phase. They hoped that, with the last bit of power in the world, they could shatter the void and ascend to immortality. Most people would think this way, but Jian Wushuang was a strategist. He always planned before acting. The planning had already begun. When the Chenzu Saintess revealed the secret, he started pondering why this power had been sealed in the first place. The ancestor of the Tang dynasty, though a man of deep emotions, was believed to have no hope of ascending. However, hearing that he could seal the power of a divine phase peak expert, Jian Wushuang realized that he was likely a super expert on the verge of ascension. Why didn't such a person absorb that power and ascend directly? Either he had no interest in ascension, or there was a problem with that power, making him too afraid to absorb it. Hence, he sealed it. But now, the current Tang emperor had discovered it and wanted to try absorbing that power for ascension. To Jian Wushuang, regardless of the secrets hidden within that power, he needed to obtain it, so he had to move quickly. As for the others, if they went along, they would only compete with him. Why wait? Yang Xiao wanted to wait for Wei Jiuxian, and the Chenzu Saintess wanted to wait for her tribe's experts. Jian Wushuang had no reason to wait. Since this power is now sealed within the altar, everyone can rely on their own abilities. Jian Wushuang's words left the group stunned. Recalling Jian Wushuang's previous godlike strength, they couldn't help but worry that he might decide to eliminate them all at this moment. Don't worry, I have no intention of attacking you. Whether you're from the Xianxia Guard or the 1,000-foot tribe, you can choose to wait or go now. We'll rely on our own abilities, and I won't strike against you first. Jian Wushuang had enough magnanimity to say this. To him, that power was already within his grasp. With his current strength and the burning of his thought power, even a divine phase expert would not be his match. He might not be invincible, but he dared to fight. Join me or wait here. It's your choice. The Chenzu Saintess and Yang Xiao hesitated no longer and replied, "We'll go." Good. Jian Wushuang enveloped the group with his thought power, and with a powerful surge of energy, they instantly soared into the sky. Without holding back, they flew straight toward Mongshan County. Their speed reached the peak of the infant transformation phase. This was even with others in tow. Without them, they would have been faster. While they made a grand entrance toward Mongshan County, they were unaware that a heavy guard had already been stationed outside the county. The Tang Emperor had initiated the final plan, gathering all the experts from the Qiang sect and the Xianxia Guard, sending them to Mongshan County. Such a large-scale mobilization could not escape Wei Jiuxian's notice. He immediately recalled Changfeng and led half of the Xianxia Guard to Mongshan County as well. Besides the Tang dynasty of the Eastern Land, ancient inheritors from the Northern Glacier and tribes from the barbarian wilderness had also received word. The cultivators from the entire Red Eye realm seemed to converge. all heading toward Mongshan County at once. The wind stirred, and the clouds trembled. Outside Mongshan County, 800 miles from the city of Mongshan County, a group of savage men riding ferocious beasts halted at the foot of the mountains. Among them, an elderly man clad in clothes sewn from animal hides slowly stepped forward. Tears glistened in his eyes as he gazed in the direction of Mongshan County. His voice quivered as he said, "Our great ancestor, soon our Qianzu tribe will be able to bring you home." "Bring the great ancestor home," echoed a middle-aged man behind the elder, whose appearance bore a striking resemblance to him. Instantly, the entire valley resounded with a thunderous uproar. From a higher vantage point, the entire valley was filled with barbarian warriors mounted on beasts. The Qianzu tribe merely took the lead, but all the tribes of the wilderness had mobilized their entire forces as well. They were doing this for their great ancestor, and also to overthrow the Tang dynasty. In the western part of Mongshan County, this area bordered the vast desert, and deep within the desert lay the connection to the northern glaciers. There, ancient relics could be found, a sacred land for ancient qi refiners. Almost all the cultivators of the Scarlet Eye realm yearned to reach this sacred land to receive the inheritance of the divine eye. However, very few managed to pass the inheritance. But those who did were able to establish sects in the northern glaciers. In the past 1,000 years, sects in the northern glaciers had dwindled, but a few super sects remained. Now they had all gathered outside Mongshan County. The leader of these sects wore a Taoist robe, his face as handsome as jade. Though he appeared to be a youth of 17 or 18, he had lived for over 1,000 years, and his strength was unfathomable. He was the Taoist leader of the northern glaciers, having once passed the 4th level of the divine eye inheritance. With this inheritance, he had cultivated to the peak, yet he was still a step away from shattering the void. If he could obtain that sealed power, he was confident he could ascend. "I have waited 1,000 years, and finally, the seal is breaking. I wonder which high expert has been plotting behind the scenes." The young Taoist leader stood with his hands behind his back, treading the void between the valleys. His steps reverberated through the air. The surrounding space rippled. Behind him, countless majestic warships sailed against the wind, moving through the high skies. On the decks, rows of cultivators stood, all of them in the golden core stage. There were over 1,000 people in total. Such a powerful force was enough to rival the entire Eastern Tang of the Great Tang. One had to know that since the Tao realm had shattered, the entire cultivation world had been in decline. The cultivators of the Southern Heaven realm no longer resembled true cultivators, indulging in wealth and the pleasures of the mortal world. The Northern Ice region, on the other hand, was too cold and heartless, resembling a traditional cultivation sect. Only the Great Tang retained a trace of human warmth. Thus, the most cultivators were born there, and in fact, many of the cultivators in the Northern Ice region originally hailed from Eastern Tang of the Great Tang. The only pity was that now, everyone had their own duties. Though they came from the Great Tang, they had to fight for their own opportunities. Moreover, this Tang was no longer their Tang. It was the Tang of the Imperial Li clan. No one cared about their identity as Tang cultivators anymore. At the same time, high above the coast of the eastern region, a group of cultivators in luxurious robes also stepped across the sea. Their display was grand, and their numbers were many. Besides the golden core cultivators, they had even brought innate cultivators, significantly outnumbering the barbarian tribes. Anyone unaware of the situation might have thought they were here to attack the Great Tang, but that wasn't the case. These cultivators came from the Southern Heaven realm, from various sects worshipped by the 7 southern nations. Their sects were scattered, without a core structure, a loose collection that looked grand but was actually hollow. The 76 warships in the lead rose from the sea, hovering in mid-air, creating a spectacular sight. But behind it all were golden core stage cultivators silently contributing their strength. Especially the massive warship in the lead, which was over 100 meters long and wide. To keep it suspended in mid-air required a force far beyond the nascent soul stage. However, the Southern Heaven realm was the weakest, and nascent soul-stage cultivators would never waste their strength on appearances. Thus, the burden fell on the Golden Core cultivators operating the warships. Those people from Tianyang sect are truly shameless. The three of us do all the hard work, and they bask in the glory outside. I'm not happy about it. In the control room, a burly man grumbled as he channeled energy into the warship. Beside him, two others were using the same methods to control the massive ship. The thin elder in charge tried to comfort him, saying, "Enough, they paid us too much. It's not a big deal to swallow our pride for a bit. Stop complaining, and once we get the ship over there, we'll slip away." "But what if there's a benefit?" asked a young cultivator with sharp features, unable to resist. This time, the Southern Heaven Realm had put in such effort not just for a show, but because they had received news, a piece of information that could change the entire cultivation world. However, the three of them were only in the late Golden Core stage and weren't qualified to know such secrets. They only knew that a great opportunity awaited, but what exactly it was, they had no idea. The thin elder's brow furrowed at his companion's question, and he scolded, "Just get to work. For people like us, Tianyang sect's reward is already a great opportunity." Buzz. 72 warships simultaneously sailed towards the Great Tang's coast, with a clear target Mongshan County City. In just a few days, the events in Mongshan County City had spread like wildfire, gathering cultivators from the entire Scarlet Eye realm. No one knew who had leaked the information. No one cared to investigate the source either. They all chose to believe it. That was the strangest part of it all. Oh. In Tian City, within the Imperial Palace. In the rear garden, Emperor Guangfu Li Miao walked barefoot on the muddy ground scattered with flower petals, enjoying the cold sensation. The Great Tang Emperor found it quite pleasurable. "Lord Wei, I'm glad you came to see me today, but your earlier words have put me in a difficult position." Li Miao spoke casually, strolling through the soft soil, admiring the flowers and occasionally picking one to sniff. Wei Zhouxian stood by the corridor at the edge of the garden, head held high, completely ignoring the Emperor's subtle reprimand. His expression grew increasingly grim. "Your Majesty, I care not about the people of the Northern Ice region, but the barbarian tribes have entered Mongshan County with 100,000 troops, and those from the Southern Heaven Realm have gathered tens of thousands of warships on the sea. Even the mortals have come. Why is this? What does it mean? Surely your Majesty knows better than I do." Wei Zhouxian's tone was neither humble nor arrogant. He valued the Great Tang more than the Emperor before him. For the Great Tang, he would defy the Emperor and even give up his position as the commander of the Xianxia Guard. Now, with enemies invading from all sides, how could he not be anxious, even if it meant offending the sovereign? "You've worked tirelessly for the Great Tang, and I've taken note." Emperor Guangfu slowly turned his head, his tone softening as he gazed at this elder statesman. He recalled the time when he had just ascended the throne, and Wei Zhouxian had stood by his side. Later, when the rebel king attacked, it was Wei Zhouxian who protected him, allowing him to reclaim his throne. It wasn't just the Qiang sect's support. It was also the assistance of this commander. He had been intelligent since childhood, surpassing the former emperor in the art of ruling. How could he not discern who among the court officials were loyal ministers and who were traitorous ones? "But the things I must do are equally important. The events of 3 years ago will not repeat themselves. This empire will not perish because of me. It will exist because of me. Do you understand?" After saying this, the Guangfu Emperor's dragon robe fluttered behind him, and his entire aura surged. Born with the appearance of a dragon, once he reached the divine image realm, he could unleash the power of the dragon image, becoming a supreme powerhouse within the realm. Yet Wei Zhouxian found it laughable. He even laughed out loud. Is this still the same little brat who was kicked off the dragon throne 3 years ago? 3 years had passed and too many people had changed. The young emperor who had been kicked off the dragon throne back then now dared to utter such words as "exist because of me." Perhaps that ancient figure from 1,000 years ago could have said this. But 1,000 years later, even the one from Baoguang Temple could not. "Are you mocking me?" The Guangfu Emperor's expression twisted, both deranged and furious. as he shouted, "Wei Jiuxian, the bond between us has reached its limit. Don't push me. Now, you just need to stand quietly atop the southern city gate and watch me complete my grand plan. Afterward, you can do whatever you want with the empire." Wei Jiuxian shook his head and said firmly, "Too late. It's time for a new emperor in this Tang dynasty." "How dare you?" The Guangfu emperor's face changed. Although he had long expected Wei Jiuxian to join forces with the Desire King to force his abdication, he had not anticipated that Wei would still dare to tear off the mask after witnessing his strength. He had just displayed his power to let Wei know that he was no longer the little emperor who could be easily kicked aside 3 years ago. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Wei Jiuxian knocked off his official hat, and from his sleeve slid out a 9-ridge-long whip. The king's whip. The Guangfu emperor was shocked. This was the king's whip passed down from their ancestors, used to strike corrupt rulers and rebellious ministers. It had fallen into the hands of the Desire King in this generation. The two had originally been mortal enemies, but the nobles valued the empire above all. It didn't matter who the emperor was, as long as the empire remained and the one on the throne bore the surname Li. As for the current emperor, naturally someone had to lead the charge to overthrow him. Just as Wei Jiuxian made his move, outside the imperial palace, the Desire King and 100 princes and dukes from the Xianxia mansion entered the court. The Empress Dowager issued a decree, and its contents were simple. It was the truth about Mongshan County. The current emperor is foolish, favoring the demonic cult and indulging in slaughter. For his own selfish desires, he has ruined the empire left by the ancestors. Today, we advise him to abdicate, persuade, but not against. After all, the Tang dynasty was still the Tang dynasty. The Desire King and his group didn't care whether the Restoration Emperor had been taken down by Wei Jiuxian. They had already started drafting a second imperial decree to select a new emperor. As for the confidants of the Restoration Emperor, they had all headed to Mongshan country. Whether it was the Qiang sect or the Zhanshan guards led by the guardians of Nanshan, they were all gathering in Mongshan country. There wasn't a single confidant of the Restoration Emperor left within Taiyan City. Adding to this, Wei Jiuxian acted cleanly and efficiently, quickly allowing the Desire King to gain control of the situation. Meanwhile, the battle between Wei Jiuxian and Emperor Li Miao also came to an end. Their struggle lasted only the time it took for an incense stick to burn. This made Li Miao, who had been so confident, unable to believe that he had actually lost to Wei Jiuxian. He had just broken through to become a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. "You've been hiding your strength all along?" Li Miao's face was full of shock. Wei Jiuxian remained calm and said indifferently, "I was never too focused on cultivation, but after what happened 3 years ago, I could no longer remain indifferent." "Humph!" Li Miao sneered, shaking his head. He casually threw his dragon robe to the ground and bitterly smiled. "I underestimated you. Reaching nascent soul completion. Truly remarkable." As he spoke, he began to walk towards the door. This place no longer belonged to him, and he had never intended to be an emperor for life. Once one embarked on the path of cultivation, all worldly matters would gradually be forgotten. So he dared to go against all public opinion, slaughtering common people to gather blood pills for his cultivation. This was also the reason why he and Wei Jiuxian had parted ways. "Your Majesty," Wei Jiuxian said softly. "Back then, when she entrusted the imperial consort to you, you should have kept your promise." Whoosh! Hearing these words, Li Miao stopped in his tracks, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Enough, I've given you the entire Tang dynasty. What more do you want?" Li Miao impatiently shouted, venting the frustration in his heart. In truth, his heart was filled with more fear than anyone else's. That promise from years ago. An image flashed through his mind. A delicate woman leaned against him, while he knelt on the ground. At that time, he had not yet ascended to the throne. He was just the crown prince. In that image, he knelt before a woman dressed in pure white, as spotless as snow. That woman was like a beacon in the darkness, pure and flawless. She was the embodiment of all light. You wronged the imperial consort, and you wronged the celestial maiden who brought her back to life. At this moment, Wei Juxian's words shattered his light. Celestial Maiden? That title caused Li Miao's entire body to tremble. After a long moment, he suddenly turned around and sneered at Wei Juxian. She was just an ancient cultivator sealed in the northern glacier. She was never a celestial maiden. If she were a celestial maiden, how could she have fallen in love with a monk? It's utterly laughable. Is that so? And who do you think orchestrated your downfall today? Wei Juxian sneered. Li Miao grew even more terrified, losing all the pride and composure he once had. This was the deepest fear buried in his heart. The princess's tomb, the most mysterious imperial mausoleum of the Tang dynasty, and also an immensely terrifying force. Impossible! How could she be connected to the princess's tomb? Besides, she said she would ascend soon. How could she still be in the Red Eyes realm? Li Miao was already somewhat hysterical. Wei Juxian continued to provoke him. You're right. She is no longer in this world. But the princess's tomb remains, as does the Baoguang temple. When your ancestors sealed that power, they foresaw this day. That's why someone has come to break the seal. Are you talking about those few people from Jiang Kingdom? Li Miao took a deep breath. He had many spies throughout the world, and the first pavilion of the world was one of them. When Jian Wushuang and his companions had just entered Tian City, they were immediately watched. Those cultivators from the Jiang Kingdom, combined with the destruction of the Jiang royal family and the absence of bodies, had raised Li Miao's suspicions. He had then sent the experts from the Qiang sect to assassinate Jian Wushuang and the others. It was initially a probe, but the group suddenly disappeared from Tian City. Now, in hindsight, they were probably hidden by Wei Juxian. Wei Juxian, you truly had your own agenda. When I sent people to the Jiang Kingdom to search for the Celestial Maiden, you obstructed me at every turn, secretly opposing me. Now it seems that the Celestial Maiden indeed left something behind. If I'm not mistaken, she must be that woman in plain clothing who visited the Baoguang temple earlier. At this moment, Li Miao's expression became calm, as if everything had returned to his control. The conversation between the two seemed completely aimless, yet it inadvertently revealed a shocking secret. Mongshan Country, the Rift Sky Canyon. Jian Wushuang, along with his group, arrived at the canyon outside Mongshan City at the first possible moment. As soon as they landed, they sensed countless auras flashing around them, indicating that powerful beings had already arrived in advance. This surprised the group, and they exchanged glances, each harboring suspicions in their hearts. After all, the Chenzu Saintess had just revealed the hidden secret beneath Mongshan Country, and they had rushed over immediately, only to find that others had arrived even earlier. This inevitably made them wonder if someone had tipped them off in advance. Yang Xiao had indeed sent a message, but he had only informed Wei Juxian, a disgraced eunuch. How could such a person have the ability to gather so many powerful figures? There was clearly more to this than they knew. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jian Wushuang began to question Yang Xiao. He first inquired about the situation on Wei Juxian's side, then brought up the matter of the Jiang Kingdom, which they had long wanted to understand. At the mention of this, Yang Xiao's expression turned grim. Jiang Shang, on the other hand, eagerly awaited the answer he had dreamed of for so long. This matter, I shouldn't be talking about it, but since you all come from the Jiang Kingdom, I knew I couldn't hide it from you. Yang Xiao forced a bitter smile. At that moment, he finally understood why Jian Wushuang and the others had been protecting him. It was all because he had once visited the Jiang Kingdom and completed a top-secret mission. Very few people knew about this. As for his trip to the Jiang Kingdom, only a few within the Zhanshan Guard knew about it, and the mission's content was known to only 3 people. One was his direct superior, Wei Juxian, and another was the Emperor of the Tang Restoration, Li Miao. To this day, no one else knew about it, because it involved a shocking secret. Yang Xiao, I have 2 ways of finding out about this. You should understand what I mean. Jian Wushuang's tone carried a hint of threat. He could search his soul or have him speak, but the former was too extreme. If Yang Xiao willingly spoke, things would be much easier. Yang Xiao was the kind of person who responded better to gentle persuasion, but at this moment, he knew better than to resist, especially since this earth-shattering secret was related to the Jiang kingdom. He also knew that Jian Wushuang and the others came from the Jiang kingdom. In the end, he chose not to resist anymore. After all, revealing it wouldn't harm Wei Jiuxian, and as for that emperor, he had long ceased to recognize him. Mongshan country had been slaughtered entirely by the current emperor. Such a rebellious act would not be unjustified, even if the emperor himself were executed. Why would he still have any desire to protect the emperor's secret? I can tell you, but everyone else needs to step aside. Yang Xiao glanced at the Chenzu Saintess and Chen Yuan. Jian Wushuang raised his hand and formed a barrier. This barrier, created by thought power, isolated sound and movement. Even those who could read lips wouldn't be able to discern what Yang Xiao was saying. If Jian Wushuang had more power, he could have isolated time and space directly, but he deemed such precautions unnecessary for a mundane world's small secret. Once everything was arranged, Zhang Shang, the most excited of the group, couldn't help but urge, "Why did you go to the Jiang kingdom back then? Was it because of a woman in white? So you do know her?" Yang Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly. The more he looked at the woman in front of him, the more she resembled the woman in white from the painting the Emperor of Tang had given him. Jian Wushuang turned his head to glance at Zhang Shang, then looked at Yang Xiao, frowning as he said, "Just say it directly. No need to beat around the bush." He could only guess so much, and simply listening to the other person riddling wouldn't help. Even if he had a mind as sharp as a seven-orifice exquisite heart, he wouldn't be able to figure it out. And it was exhausting. This matter. I don't know much about it, but I do know that it's related to Qishan Temple and the princess's tomb, Yang Xiao said, his gaze tinged with recollection. He continued, "Not long after the Tang Emperor's restoration, he suddenly summoned me and Duke Wei. They handed me a portrait and instructed me to go to the Jiang kingdom to find the person in the painting. However, on the day I was about to depart, Duke Wei privately found me and told me to bypass the Jiang kingdom, take a detour over the sea, and return without conducting any investigation in Jiang." Yang Xiao remembered the scene clearly. In addition to advising him not to go to the Jiang kingdom, Duke Wei also revealed the identity of the woman in the portrait, a celestial maiden. The woman in the portrait was an ancient celestial maiden. This title left Zhang Shang somewhat puzzled. While Xiangyang listened as if it were just a story, only Jian Wushuang was left standing frozen in place. It really is her. There couldn't be such a coincidence in the world. A celestial maiden, the maiden of the 9 heavens, Zhang Shang. At that moment, he recalled the deity statue enshrined in Qishan Temple. His voice trembled as he asked, "What is the connection between the deity statue in Qishan Temple and the celestial maiden?" "I'm not too sure about that, but the records in the Zhanxian Guard's archives state that the deity statue was brought to the Tang dynasty by an ancestor 1,000 years ago. It was said to be called Chanji," Yang Xiao replied, somewhat puzzled as to why Jian Wushuang would ask such an unrelated question. Weren't they talking about the celestial maiden just now? Moreover, he could tell that Zhang Shang was likely the descendant left behind by the celestial maiden. What intrigued him was who could have been responsible for the celestial maiden having a descendant. Although Yang Xiao didn't fully understand the identity of the celestial maiden, he could guess that she had the power to ascend at the time. No one in the entire world would have been worthy enough for her to leave a child behind. It all seemed unsolvable. But Jian Wushuang had found the answer in his heart. The deity statue might have been the remnant left behind when Huiqing played chess with the celestial maiden in the Guyu spacetime and later somehow fell into the realm god continent. He had figured out the reason. The only mystery remaining was why it had appeared in this world, and why he had encountered it by chance. Glancing at Zhang Shang, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but reach out and touch her head, a smile forming at the corner of his eyes. Zhang Shang didn't shy away, instead curiously asking, "Senior, do you know my mother?" She wasn't foolish and could tell that Jian Wushuang's expression had drastically changed after hearing her mother's name. Of course, this was because Jian Wushuang hadn't hidden his reaction. He nodded, not denying it, and calmly said, "I knew her, a long time ago." Xiangyang, standing nearby, silently complained about Jian Wushuang in his heart. You know everyone, huh? You've only been here a few days, and I'm embarrassed to expose you. In his view, Jian Wushuang was definitely pretending to be mysterious with no good intentions. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and casually lifted the barrier, saying, "Everyone, the chance for ascension is right before us. It's all up to your own abilities now." Everyone nodded in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. Taiyan City. The restored emperor staggered out of the imperial palace, having shed his dragon robe and donned a coarse Taoist robe, with a trace of malevolence at the tip of his brow. Everyone in the world thinks this palace is a treasure, but they don't realize it's a cage. Today, I've escaped from this cage, and I shall no longer be the emperor trapped inside, Li Miao said, his figure flickering as he disappeared from the palace gate. When he reappeared, he had already arrived at the imperial tombs. The largest tomb among them wasn't for an emperor, but for a princess. This princess's tomb had become the ancestral tomb that every former emperor had to worship. This was because, back then, when the prince from a small foreign nation married into the Tang dynasty, it was naturally impossible for him to worship someone from another country, even if that person had founded the Baoguang temple. Li Miao walked along the path of the imperial tombs, heading towards the deepest part, where a towering ancient palace stood. At this moment, a figure in black appeared in front of the ancient palace. Judging by the posture, it was a woman seemingly young, yet with a commanding presence. Li Miao, what are you doing here? Few would dare to speak to the recently abdicated emperor in such a tone. Li Miao didn't get angry. Instead, he calmly replied, "Even though I am no longer the emperor of the Tang dynasty, the princess's tomb is still the ancestral tomb of my Li family. I am here to pay my respects. Do I need to report to you?" Seeing the other person momentarily speechless, he no longer paid her any attention and walked straight into the hall. The hall was simply furnished, with statues and altars. He first lit 3 incense sticks, respectfully bowed several times, and then turned to head to the rear hall. It was dark and damp here, with occasional water droplets falling, creating a pleasant sound. "Guardian of the tomb, may I have the honor of meeting you?" Li Miao called out, but there was no response. The woman from outside the hall followed him in and said, "Li Miao, my master has gone to Mongshan country. She said that if you want to take Sister Yi away, you'll have to get through me first." Hee hee. Li Miao let out a strange laugh and slowly turned his head. At this moment, his face had changed to a new one. A withered face with black blood flowing across it. Countless venomous insects crawled upon it. His face had no features, only wriggling insects. The woman, who had been so confident with her sword moments before, turned pale with fright. Before she could react, she realized that Li Miao's body had suddenly disintegrated into countless blood-red insects, like a blood mist, instantly engulfing her flesh. In just one day, changes unfolded in various places, one after another. Especially in Taiyan City, the situation had become incredibly complex. But for Wei Jiuxian, everything was calm. He finally had a moment to sweep the snow from his front door. Pass down the order. Leave 30,000 imperial guards to defend the imperial city. 6 captains will be assigned to ensure the safety of the city walls and the interior. The rest will assemble outside the city. Inform Desire King that the new emperor's enthronement cannot be delayed. Order Changfeng to lead the vanguard troops to Mongshan country to rendezvous with number 10. Someone there will tell him what to do. Standing at the threshold, Wei Jiuxian issued command after command. The dark figures behind him gradually disappeared, until only he remained. By then, the sky had darkened. Yet, in his eyes there was light. For the sake of the emperor, for the Tang dynasty, for the countless citizens, this world needs to be cleaned up. Buzz. At that moment, Wei Jiuxian appeared like a heavenly deity descending to earth, radiating light. With a single move, he pushed back the darkness and strode towards Mongshan country, bathed in brilliance. As for Taiyan City, if they lost this battle, there would be no need for its continued existence. But if they won, it would shine even brighter. At the same time, in Baoguang Temple, the 3 Buddha statues erupted with a burst of light. Master Mingjue, who had been silently reciting Buddhist scriptures, suddenly opened his eyes. "They're here." He quickly stood up and walked straight towards the rear hall. Bowing respectfully to 2 of the statues within, he said, "Disciple Mingjue greets the Arhat's eradication and annihilation." "Mingjue, why are you the only one here to greet us? Where are the others?" The 2 Arhats glared angrily, their expressions fierce and menacing. This was in line with the Arhat status they had attained. With hands clasped together, Mingjue explained, "All the warrior monks of Baoguang Temple have been borrowed by Wei Zhoxian. He is a key figure in this tribulation, and the true Immortal has instructed that, aside from Patriarch Fanxin, everyone is to obey Wei Zhoxian's commands. Humph, the so-called true Immortal? He's just someone who failed in his ascension. How dare he challenge Patriarch Fanxin?" The 2 Arhats were full of disdain. "You 2 don't seem to respect my senior brother much." At that moment, another figure spoke. She had thick, green hair, and within her eyes lay a deep, indescribable killing intent. In her presence, the 2 battle-hardened Arhats lost their luster. Even Mingjue felt a deep unease. Compared to facing the 2 Arhats, he was more afraid of the green-haired woman before him. She was the true master of slaughter. Immortal Fu Qingjian. In ancient times, she was a peerless sword immortal, renowned for her incredible might. She had slain over 10,000 gods in her time. She hailed from the upper realm, a supreme power from an ancient domain in the upper realm. She descended to this world because of the divine eye-secret technique. But once she descended to a lower world like this, her strength would be suppressed, and she would be bound by the laws of the heavens. Ascension would be nearly impossible unless a great opportunity presented itself. Clearly, this sword immortal from the upper realm had missed the grand opportunity of ancient times, which was why she remained in the red-eyed world. In this era of dwindling power, she chose to enter a deep slumber, only to be awakened by Patriarch Fanxin from the northern glacier and brought back to the Great Tang. Her presence silenced the 2 battle-hardened Arhats. Patriarch Fanxin was their master's master, yet the ruthless woman before them was even more powerful than their master. Seeing the 2 Arhats fall silent, Fu Qing continued, "It wasn't my senior brother who awakened me. It must have been Fanxin. Where is he?" Master left Baoguang Temple in a hurry after meeting with 2 cultivators from the Jiang Kingdom. He mentioned that something significant would happen in Mongshan County soon, and instructed me to assist Wei Zhoxian, along with the 2 Arhats, the true Immortal, and you, Immortal Fu Qingjian. Fu Qingjian frowned slightly. Her power was already limited, and every bit she used would deplete her reserves. She wouldn't have chosen to awaken unless it was absolutely necessary. Now that Fanxin wasn't even here, and she had been summoned by a junior, she felt a surge of irritation. She asked, "Where is senior brother Xinghai?" "True Immortal Xinghai went to Mongshan County," Mingjue answered truthfully. Throughout the conversation, Mongshan County kept coming up. Clearly, all the answers lay there. Ignoring the others, Fu Qingjian clenched her hand, and her ethereal form solidified. She now wore the same white and green robe as her spiritual form, with a divine sword strapped to her back. Her aura was even more menacing than before. Without wasting any words, she broke through the void, flying into the sky, identified her direction, and headed straight for Mongshan County. The 3 remaining individuals looked at each other. Eradication Arhat was about to say something to regain some dignity when he sensed a disturbance coming from the northern glacier. "That far away, and I can still sense it?" Eradication Arhat muttered. "Are those demon cultists doing?" Before he could finish, he remembered that Patriarch Fanxin seemed to be at the northern glacier too, and his expression immediately became serious. "Mingjue, you are responsible for guarding Baoguang Temple. Annihilation and I will head to Mongshan County." With that, he solidified his form and broke through the void, leaving swiftly. Mingjue stood before the temple gate, letting out a soft sigh. His strength wasn't sufficient. Although he was formidable among the Jindan cultivators, even achieving an invincible level within his rank. He still lacked the qualifications to participate in this great tribulation without reaching the nascent soul stage. The winds of change were upon them. Experts within Tian City began to move in a frenzy, rushing towards Mongshan County. Even the common folk in the city sensed that something was amiss, as the army guarding the capital had already mobilized. When immortals fight, it's not just the immortals who suffer. Although Mongshan County no longer housed mortals, the land still belonged to the Tang Empire. So it had to be defended. Even if immortals were battling there, they had to go. After all, many from the barbarian lands and the southern seven kingdoms had also gone, eager to annex the Tang Empire in one swift move. Among the major forces, only the barbarian lands and the southern seven kingdoms harbored such ambitions. The ancient cultivators of the northern glacier, known to the Tang Empire as demon cultivators, had no interest in seizing territory. Most of them originated from the Tang Empire, and after accepting the inheritance of the Divine Eye, they remained in the northern glacier to cultivate. By now, night had fully fallen. Mongshan County was engulfed in darkness, without a single light, resembling a primordial beast lurking outside the canyon. Yet, deep within the canyon, the area was ablaze with light, as bright as day. In the southeast direction, 72 warships hovered in mid-air above the mountain ridges, resembling a vast constellation, illuminating the peaks. The two large factions, with their numerous members, were positioned very close to each other, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. The lower-ranking experts were ready, their fists clenched, waiting for the command. What they didn't know was that the top experts from all the major forces had already gathered at the summit of the mountains. A figure clad in luxurious robes, exuding a powerful aura and bearing a stern expression that commanded respect, stood at the forefront and spoke loudly. Nantian Realm, Tianyang Sect Master, Hua Shuejian, I Xianxia, represent the Northern Glacier. The young man in a yellow Taoist robe merely raised his head slightly, appearing very modest. With the leaders of the two great cultivation realms having spoken, a representative from the Barbarian Lands forces also stepped forward. Barbarian Lands, Chenzu leader, Miao Renfeng. The white-haired man, though appearing old, had a robust physique, with his chest bare and clad in beast skins that gave him a wild look. However, his tone was surprisingly gentle. Strictly speaking, the barbarian lands didn't count as part of the cultivation world. Their isolationist ways and refusal to acknowledge the practices of ancient Qi cultivators meant they were never truly part of the same path. Over time, as they abandoned ancient inheritances, their power gradually waned, leading to their exclusion to the barbarian lands' territories. Most of them lived on the borders between the eastern lands and the northern glacier. In ordinary times, orthodox cultivators would look down on these people. But now, with everyone gathered together to face the entire eastern lands cultivation world, they naturally came together. There was no idle chit-chat. They went straight to the point: how to enter Mongshan County. In truth, they had already arrived. But no one had taken the first step into Mongshan County city, fearing an ambush. Here is the translation. An empty city. No guards, no presence of any kind. This surprised them greatly. If it were just one faction coming, they might have taken the risk, but with three parties gathered together, who would take the lead became the critical question. As the saying goes, when three people walk together, one can be my teacher. This saying wasn't wrong, and it had spread widely among many mortal worlds for a reason. When people gathered, power formed. Just like now, with three factions converging, each had its own calculations. And since the matter was of great importance, some had even waited for 1,000 years. At such a crucial moment, the first to bear the brunt of the attack would affect their chances in the subsequent struggle for the opportunity. Thus, they were all conserving their strength, trying to manipulate the others into taking the lead. However, the leaders of the three great factions had different thoughts. They were the most anxious because it concerned their greatest interests. What opportunities could those in the middle and lower ranks find here? They were nothing more than cannon fodder. But now, the three leaders had to make some symbolic gestures. If they recklessly charged in and only let one side's subordinates die, they would lose face. The most anxious were still the three leaders, so they gathered together to perform this public show. Such things were most evident among mortals, but even among cultivators, while the effect was somewhat diminished, it still persisted. Even if only one faction came, there would still be internal factions and conflicts. In the end, everyone was fighting for themselves. If there were a few hot-headed individuals, it would be a rare occurrence. Time is of the essence. We need to come up with a strategy quickly. Don't forget, this is the Eastern Lands, this is the Great Tang, the strongest cultivation world in the Scarlet Eye realm. I'm sure many of you come from the Great Tang and understand just how powerful its foundation is. The true Immortal from Baoguang Temple is rumored to be a peak nascent soul cultivator. And the Guardian of Princess Tomb has always been a nascent soul stage cultivator. Hua Xuejian from the Southern Heaven realm spoke first. He felt he should take the lead. After all, among the three factions, it was the Southern Heaven realm that had the most to boast about. Although the Northern Territory Glacier was an ancient relic, and its cultivators were known as inheritors, in the eyes of those from the Southern Heaven realm and the Eastern Lands, they were nothing more than a group of demonic cultivator disciples. Because ancient inheritance didn't only mean the God Eye inheritance. The God Eye inheritance was extremely harsh. Many cultivators couldn't even pass the most basic Black Eye inheritance. So, many who went to the Northern Territory Glacier after losing hope would go to other relics to try their luck. The main focus of the ancient inheritance was the God Eye inheritance, but those who became superpowerful through it would leave behind their own inheritance grounds before ascending. In its heyday, thousands of immortals ascended. Their inheritances fell into the Northern Territory Glacier like raindrops. Therefore, many cultivators inherited from the ancient cultivators and became known as inheritors. But among these inheritances, demonic cultivators were the most numerous. Because the requirements were low, many accepted the inheritance of demonic cultivators. That's why they were called demonic cultivator disciples by the outside world. Calling them disciples was even a compliment. In such a grand setting, being polite meant referring to them as cultivators of the holy sect. If things turned ugly or they were mentioned behind their backs, they would be cursed as demonic cultivators. Of course, even the proud geniuses who could accept the God Eye inheritance were also cursed. But those who reached such heights didn't care about the opinions of the outside world. Now, with Hua Xuejian from the Southern Heaven realm speaking up and showcasing the righteousness of his sect, it was a normal move. As for Miao Renfeng from the Savage Barbarians, he was hardly worth mentioning, so naturally, he had nothing to say. Instead, he was eager to hear what this righteous leader from the Southern Heaven realm had in mind. In his understanding, the more righteous a cultivator claimed to be, the more devious their schemes, and they could still speak with great righteousness. Xianxia from the Northern Territory Glacier, on the other hand, was more pragmatic. He didn't care about Hua Xuejian's leadership demeanor. What mattered to him was how things would proceed now. So after hearing Hua Xuejian's empty words, he immediately retorted, Baoguang Temple and Princess Tomb won't easily involve themselves. Even if they do, these two can't stop the forces of our three factions. You're right. Hua Xuejian waved his hand and then arrogantly declared, in Baoguang Temple, it's nothing more than a Luo Han, or perhaps a true immortal, or maybe just the spirit keeper of the Princess Tomb. These are all minor issues. Besides, this time we've come to uphold the righteous path. Within Mongshan County lies a vast amount of death energy. So much so that even ordinary people can sense the endless resentment hidden within it. Clearly, demonic cultivators have emerged within the Tang Empire. It is our duty to eradicate these demonic cultivators. Even if the entire Tang Empire falls into demonic ways, I, Hua Xuejian, will wipe out the entire Tang Empire if I must. This lengthy speech was delivered with such passion that Hua Xuejian almost painted himself as a saint. Miao Renfeng could hardly suppress his laughter. Wasn't the most infamous demonic cult in the outside world the one from the northern region's glacier? He glanced at Zhang Xianxing, whose expression remained unchanged, though a trace of anxiety still lingered between his brows. Hua Xuejian began to employ the tactics he used in the southern sky realm, starting by addressing Zhang Xianxing. I'm glad that the northern region's glacier could join us this time. I've thoroughly investigated that demonic cult. It has some connections with your northern region's glacier. So this time, you might consider it as cleaning up your own house. I'm someone who values boundaries and usually doesn't interfere in others' affairs. But this time, the Qiang sect's actions have been too egregious. Rumor has it that the Qiang sect harbors a devastating weapon capable of threatening the entire cultivation world. We, the Southern Sky Realm, must intervene and eliminate this sect. Ahem, ahem. Alliance Master Hua, you're most righteous. With the three of us united, eliminating the Qiang sect is certainly not an issue. The key point is that this is their territory. On the surface, everything seems calm, but who knows what dangers lie within. The most pressing matter now is to gather the strongest from all three sides and storm Mongshan County's capital together. Miao Renfeng couldn't bear the conversation's direction any longer. If they kept talking, they wouldn't reach a conclusion before dawn. So he redirected the discussion back on track. Seeing the conversation finally hit the critical point, Xianxia nodded and said, "Indeed, given the current situation, relying on one side alone isn't enough. We need to unite and first enter Mongshan County to investigate." Noticing the anxious expressions on their faces, Hua Xuejian first showed a trace of worry, then looked at the two of them and asked, "Do you two have any brilliant ideas?" The sudden shift in attitude caught Zhang Xiansheng and Miao Renfeng off guard. However, since the discussion was finally moving forward, they didn't dwell on it and quickly presented a comprehensive strategy. The strategy was simple. Each of the three factions would send 5 late-stage golden core cultivators to lead the charge. The second wave would consist of a nascent soul cultivator from each faction to reinforce the front lines. The third wave would involve dispatching 30 golden core cultivators and 308 martial artists from each side. Since the northern region's glacier didn't bring any innate martial artists, they would compensate by sending more golden core cultivators, with each counting as 10 innate martial artists. This plan was straightforward and wouldn't cause any dissatisfaction among the three factions. But internally, things weren't so clear-cut. Each faction had its own complex internal issues, and if they got entangled, resolving them could take a long time. Replicating this plan perfectly would be impossible. For example, among the many tribes in the wildlands, some only had 2 or 3 golden core cultivators, while others had dozens. How should that be calculated? Should the smaller tribes send 1 person, and the larger ones send 2? Surely someone would be unhappy. This was where a strong and capable leader was needed to mediate the situation. Miao Renfeng had no issues with the plan, especially since much of it was his own suggestion. Now, he was more concerned about the internal problems. So, after the three of them finalized the decision, they each returned to notify their respective tribes or sects and discuss sending out powerful individuals. In the canyon, on the way back, Miao Renfeng glanced at Hua Xuejian and wondered to himself, "This person loves the spotlight so much, yet he didn't say a word about the plan?" His curiosity quickly faded, and now he had to worry about how to explain this to his own people. In the sky, aboard the largest warship, Hua Xuejian returned to the grand hall inside, feeling quite satisfied. He was very pleased with the three-way discussion that had just taken place. On the surface, he had taken charge, but he intentionally held back when it came to the plan, not participating at all. The reason was simple: this was something even a child could come up with. Why should he be the one to state it? It wouldn't benefit him in any way and might make others think he was simple-minded. So, he deliberately let Zhang Xiansheng and Miao Renfeng present the idea. That way, he could avoid internal issues. Since the plan came from them, if anyone had complaints, they could go to Zhang Xiansheng and Miao Renfeng. It had nothing to do with him. Most importantly, being labeled as someone who sends others to die on dangerous missions wasn't a reputation he wanted. He wasn't going to wear that hat. Sure, he could dress up the idea of sending people to their deaths in grand, noble language, but deep down, who knows how others might be cursing him. So, he avoided doing anything that was thankless and unrewarding. He then revealed everything, streamlining what he had said earlier, and presented the plan proposed by Miao Renfeng and Zhang Xianqing. The hall immediately fell silent. In the southern heaven realm, there were 9 sects, large and small. Among them, Tianyang sect, where Zhang Xianzong was from, was the most powerful, with over 100 golden core cultivators and 3 nascent soul cultivators, including Zhang himself. The other sects were somewhat weaker. The only one that could compare to Tianyang sect was Giant Sword sect, which had 2 nascent soul cultivators. One of them, known as Giant Sword King Lan, was reputed to be the second strongest cultivator in the southern heaven. His strength had reached the peak of the nascent soul midstage. He was a powerhouse who could even challenge late-stage nascent soul cultivators. Aside from that, each of the other 7 sects had only 1 nascent soul cultivator, and their golden core disciples numbered only in the dozens, with the smallest sects having just over 10. The combined strength of the 9 sects wasn't much, and in terms of quality, they couldn't compare with the Northern Territory glaciers. Their combat power might not even match that of the barbarian tribes. Since the alliance leader has brought back a plan, let's discuss it. Wang Lan, who was always blunt, spoke up first, his words tinged with mockery toward Hua Xuejian. He raised an eyebrow slightly, glanced at everyone present and said, "Actually, there's not much to discuss. I think this plan is quite good. It suits me well. Since each of the 3 factions will send out cultivators, the number from our southern heaven realm isn't that many. I have a suggestion that everyone can consider. For the first tier, 5 golden core cultivators, 3 from the 9 sects and 2 from the unaffiliated cultivators. For the second tier, I'll personally take command. For the third tier, the 9 sects will send 20 golden core cultivators, and the unaffiliated cultivators will send 10. As for the remaining innate martial artists, I don't think it's necessary to divide them. We have enough people this time so we can draw lots to decide. Who agrees? Who opposes?" As soon as he finished speaking, the powerful cultivators of the 9 sects all nodded in agreement. However, the unaffiliated cultivators were put in a difficult position. Resources in the southern heaven realm were tightly controlled, and the path of an unaffiliated cultivator was already hard enough. The entire group of rogue cultivators didn't have a single cultivator at the infant transformation stage, so they were all overlooked. Good opportunities never came their way, but trouble always found them first. The worst part was that they had no right to object. Inside the hall, there were 13 chairs. 12 of them were occupied by infant transformation stage cultivators, while the last one seated a golden core perfection cultivator, the rogue cultivator representative, Chu Xiu. Although he frowned, deep down he was willing to accept this arrangement. Since he was a rogue cultivator and also their representative, naturally he wouldn't go himself. He only needed to struggle a bit to secure some benefits for his group. Many rogue cultivators relied on him, and he, in turn, relied on those behind him. It was a cooperative relationship. Now that the difficult decision was upon him, he wouldn't bear the burden alone. With a thought, he began discussing strategies with several dozen golden core stage rogue cultivators. In the end, they chose to draw lots. Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't participate in the drawing, but he still had to set an example. He decided to personally lead the third group. The 2 unlucky ones who drew the first group were both early golden core stage cultivators, weak with no treasures. Their faces were grim, but there was also a hint of excitement. If there was a great opportunity inside, they would be the first to benefit. The rogue cultivator camp had already selected their participants in batches. Now it was the turn of the 9 great sects. Deciding how to allocate the slots was far more complicated than it had been for the rogue cultivators. In the end, following Hua Xuejian's suggestion, each sect sent the same number of people. No one could complain about being at a disadvantage. They could only blame their sect's lack of strong cultivators. The Giant Sword sect didn't send any golden core stage cultivators because Wang Lan was in the second group, and that was already risky enough. No one dared to raise any objections. After all, the life of an infant transformation stage cultivator was worth 100 times more than that of a golden core stage cultivator. Among the 9 great sects, 7 had only 1 infant transformation stage cultivator, and none of them dared to take this risk. But the exceptionally powerful Wang Lan dared to take the risk. He was only 1 step away from reaching the late stage of the infant transformation, and more importantly, he had once obtained the Black Eye inheritance from the God Eye lineage. His combat strength among peers was formidable. Once he stepped into the late stage of the infant transformation, he would be no weaker than Hua Xuejian. Therefore, he wanted to take a gamble, especially since the danger wasn't that great. The greatest danger lay in the first group. Among the selected cultivators, no one dared to take the first group. As for the sects, as long as one person volunteered for the first group, they could choose not to send anyone for the third group. Faced with this temptation, several weaker sects ultimately pushed forward a few golden core stage cultivators who were unafraid of death. These three were all strong and shared one common trait. They had been stuck at the golden core stage for too long. Since the participants have been chosen, let's set off. Hua Xuejian's tone was serious as he glanced at the group. This time, you represent the southern sky realm. Make sure you give your best effort. Don't be afraid when you face danger. Remember, you still have your sects and families to protect. It is our duty as cultivators to exterminate demons and uphold the Tao. Exterminate evil. Uphold the Tao. Hua Xuejian nodded in satisfaction. With a flick of her elegant robe, she gathered everyone and left the worship. When she reappeared, the other two factions had already selected their members. The internal workings of the Northern Domain Glacier were not complicated. They were all pure cultivators. They could take risks as long as the rewards were plentiful, without much concern for other matters. It was unlike the cultivators of the Southern Heavenly Realm, who had concerns about their sects, disciples, families, and clans. They no longer resembled cultivators but rather a privileged class. As for the barbarian lands, things were much simpler. Although there were many internal tribes, the plan provided by Mioran Peak left no room for dissent. It was the simplest method, drawing lots. Everyone drew lots, and whoever drew the short straw went. Of course, some reckless souls who feared nothing fought for the first wave, making the process even simpler. Everyone is here, so let's begin. The three of them simultaneously nodded in agreement and signaled their subordinates to secretly implement the predetermined plan. The first wave consisted of 15 golden core cultivators. Using treasures that masked their auras, they silently advanced towards Mongshan County City. The second wave consisted of 3 nascent soul cultivators. They also used similar treasures to conceal their auras, following closely behind the first wave. The third wave wasn't as fortunate. However, they didn't face much danger either, so they didn't bother hiding their auras. They simply kept a 50-mile distance from Mongshan County City. Mongshan County City. The entire city was eerily silent, without a single sound. But as soon as the 15 golden core cultivators entered, the colossal beast that lay dormant in the darkness seemed to awaken. Heh. These fools sent only a few golden core cultivators to their deaths. A figure on the city wall chuckled bitterly and shook his head. Behind him stood several others. One of them, a woman from a different tribe, asked anxiously, "These are the strong warriors of our barbarian lands. Why are there so few of them? Just over a dozen golden core cultivators. Is this supposed to represent the entire strength of the cultivation world? No, these people are merely here to test the waters. But they're in for a miserable fate." These people were none other than Jian Wushuang and his companions. They had arrived in Mongshan County City long ago and had already entered the city. With Jian Wushuang's thought power masking their presence, it was difficult even for a God Appearance Realm expert to detect them. So they didn't have many concerns. When they first entered the city, just as Xianxia had described, the city was empty. During the day, they scoured the entire Mongshan County City but couldn't find the so-called altar. They had been told it was an underground altar, but they couldn't exactly dig up the entire city. Just as they grew anxious, night fell. It was then that they discovered the entire city was filled with vengeful spirits. Malevolent ghosts formed from resentment. These spirits were not weak either. They devoured each other, gradually growing stronger. They even encountered a ghost cultivator at the nascent soul stage, one that had developed intelligence. Witnessing this scene, Jian Wushuang decided to act during the night. He realized that these malevolent ghosts kept emerging, likely tied to the altar. Perhaps the altar's deathly aura had transformed into these evil spirits, allowing them to continually spawn. But after searching for a long time, they still couldn't find the altar. They eventually went to the city wall to closely observe the transformation of the ghosts into ghost cultivators. It was during this observation that Jian Wushuang noticed something peculiar. These malevolent ghosts and spirits devour each other and evolve, eventually becoming ghost cultivators. Starting from the golden core stage, they evolve further. Based on the current number of ghost cultivators in the city, 3 nascent soul peak ghost commanders could emerge. This term, Ghost Commander, was coined due to the mark on the ghost cultivators' chests. Innate martial artists corresponded to ghost soldiers. Golden core cultivators corresponded to ghost generals. Nascent soul cultivators corresponded to ghost commanders. As for the malevolent and evil spirits that hadn't evolved, they were at the postnatal level. However, postnatal martial artists were powerless against such malevolent ghosts. The ultimate attack against them was a soul-destroying strike, which manifested as a mental assault. In higher-level terms, it was a soul attack. Therefore, dealing with these malevolent ghosts and ghost cultivators required at least an innate martial artist. And consciousness and thought power were Jian Wushuang's strengths at the moment. So he wasn't in a hurry, but the cultivators outside were in for a terrible time. Jian Wushuang remained vigilant, observing the situation unfolding before him. In each of the 5 regions within the city, southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest, and central, there were ghost commanders. The ghost generals were even more numerous, with each region having hundreds of them. Sending just a dozen golden core stage cultivators would be futile. Once they entered, they would be overwhelmed in no time. Jian Wushuang did not consider the people outside as true opponents. His concern lay in understanding why this situation had arisen in the first place. The underground altar was sealed with power from 1,000 years ago, belonging to the divine image realm. And these fierce ghosts appeared to be a part of a blood sacrifice. He recalled their journey toward Tian City, where they encountered numerous corpses, and in the fishing village, he had personally witnessed the dark cultivators performing blood sacrifices on mortals. This was undoubtedly the work of the Qiang sect, and the mastermind behind it was none other than the Tang Emperor. Jian Wushuang was unaware that the current Tang Emperor had already been exiled by the Li family. If not for preserving the royal family's reputation, he would have been executed long ago. The underground altar. It's probably not as simple as it seems. With his vast knowledge, Jian Wushuang could tell that these evolved fierce ghosts were likely being cultivated to form a perfect 3 souls and 6 spirits. Once perfected, just a sliver of thought power would be needed to control this flawless soul. If combined with a strong physical body, it would result in a perfect resurrection. However, such a resurrection required a trace of thought power from the one being revived. There were countless methods to preserve thought power, and Jian Wushuang knew of over 10,000 of them. However, only a few could manifest in the mortal world. It wasn't surprising that in the Crimson Eye realm, there might be treasures or secret techniques capable of preserving thought power. Are they trying to resurrect someone? Or are they intending to devour the perfect soul to enhance their own? The latter seemed too wasteful, while the former seemed more plausible. But who would they want to resurrect? The Empress? A thought flashed through Jian Wushuang's mind, recalling the imperial decree he had heard about during his visit to the first pavilion. As he pondered this, he glanced over at Chen Yuan, intending to ask if he knew anything about the matter. However, when Jian Wushuang looked at him, he noticed that Chen Yuan seemed lost in thought, with a tear streaking down his cheek. This surprised Jian Wushuang. The last time he had seen Chen Yuan cry was when he had told him about Azzy. Who could he be grieving for now? Jian Wushuang walked over and patted Chen Yuan's shoulder, asking with concern, "What's wrong?" "Ah, it's nothing." Chen Yuan's body trembled slightly, and he forced himself to suppress his emotions. As he replied, he even managed to muster a faint smile. Anyone with keen eyes could see that Chen Yuan was troubled, and it seemed to be related to the malevolent spirits within the city. However, Jian Wushuang was more interested in knowing whether the Empress had any connection to this place. Thus, he didn't dwell too much on why Chen Yuan seemed so sorrowful. Hearing Jian Wushuang's question, Chen Yuan's face turned pale. "If it's hard for you to talk about, I can block them out." Jian Wushuang offered, his tone appearing concerned, but also making it clear that Chen Yuan needed to say something. Chen Yuan was deeply conflicted because this matter had become a heart demon for him, just like the death of Azzi. However, when he saw the city full of vengeful spirits, he thought, what did his heart demon matter compared to the lives of billions? No need to hide it. This can't be kept a secret for long anyway, Chen Yuan said with a bitter smile, shaking his head. When the others heard this, they all perked up and looked at him with curious eyes. Xianxia squinted his eyes and teased. What is it? Don't tell me all the vengeful spirits in this city are your doing. Almost, Chen Yuan responded calmly, and everyone gasped in shock. Even Jian Wushuang couldn't help but frown, using his thought power to carefully observe Chen Yuan again and again, only to find that the other man had no demonic aura, not even a trace of evil energy. There was only a faint aura of karma. What nonsense are you talking about? Chen Yuan, however, shook his head and said, I'm not lying. Everything here is because of me. In fact, Azzi's death is also entirely my fault. It's my retribution. As he spoke, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Jian Wushuang feared he might die from sudden shock, so he quickly used his power to clear Chen Yuan's meridians. I shouldn't have been so greedy. I shouldn't have been so greedy. Chen Yuan steadied himself, but tears streamed down his face. This scene left everyone utterly bewildered. But once Chen Yuan revealed the truth, they suddenly understood. Yet some were driven to fury because of it. Xianxia was one of them. He charged directly at Chen Yuan, grabbing him by the collar and roaring in anger. It was you who killed Empress Yi. How dare you commit such a treasonous act? It's not his fault. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, using thought power to separate the two of them. If anyone was to blame, it was Emperor Tang, Li Miao. Empress Yi was merely a pawn being used. But this was a knot in Chen Yuan's heart, as well as a knot in the hearts of the Xianxia guards. The former number one beauty of the Tang dynasty had perished because of an attack by the Yi King. The Xianxia guards had borne 3 years of infamy. Failing to protect the empress was also a source of deep guilt for the loyal Xianxia guards like Yang Xiao, who were devoted to the Tang dynasty. Now, Chen Yuan was telling them that he had been the one to kill Empress Yi. This story was a long one. It was the tale of a scholar who had failed the imperial exam and had no face to return home. Chen Yuan had not become the top scholar at all. After arriving in the capital, he failed the very first exam, but he was unwilling to give up. Even though he had no money, he stayed in Tian City, living alone in a ruined temple outside the city. Then came a turning point. The Yi King launched an attack, and Emperor Tang fled from Tian City. Along the way, they unexpectedly ended up seeking refuge in the ruined temple. That night, only 4 people knew what happened in the temple: Emperor Tang, Duke Han, Chen Yuan, and Empress Yi. The so-called attack by the Yi King was nothing more than an earth-shattering conspiracy. The Yi King did not seek the throne but rather the empress. As for why he desired the empress, Chen Yuan did not know. However, at the time, the Yi King was very powerful, with a terrifying force by his side that could suppress the Xianxia guards. Emperor Tang could only flee. He was afraid. Afraid that the Yi King would take the empress, yet he could not bring himself to kill her. At that moment, he encountered the poor scholar, Chen Yuan, and hinted that he should kill Empress Yi, letting the Yi King bear the infamy. If he did the deed, he would enjoy all the riches and honors. At this point, Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. Chen Yuan was just a poor scholar with no background whatsoever. If he had killed Empress Yi, he would surely have been silenced. How could they have allowed Chen Yuan, who knew the truth, to live? It made sense to spare Duke Han, as he was an old eunuch who had served the Tang emperors loyally for hundreds of years and was unlikely to be silenced. Moreover, Emperor Tang had no power to silence him, as he himself was barely surviving at that time. But killing someone like Chen Yuan would have been as easy as blowing out a candle. Why hadn't they silenced him? This led to the involvement of a certain secret method. Chen Yuan had killed Empress Yi, but Emperor Tang had prepared in advance, preserving a trace of the Empress's thought power. Even if her physical body was gone and her soul had scattered, with that trace of thought power, a particular memory of the Empress could be revived. As for her physical body, as long as it was well preserved, it could still be used for 3 years. However, this method of resurrection had one requirement. Jian Wushuang gradually understood everything, and the corners of his mouth slightly curled up. He didn't hide anything and directly revealed the true intentions of Emperor Tang. Li Miao. It wasn't just about comforting Chan Yuan. It was about making them understand that the entire city filled with vengeful spirits was for the sake of the Empress alone. Jian Wushuang didn't believe that Li Miao went to such great lengths simply to resurrect the Empress. The Empress, if revived, must have a greater purpose, which made him spare no effort to bring her back. Everyone was shocked by his speculation. What a ruthless mind, what cruel methods. Yang Zhao's face showed fear. This was the first time he was truly scared, even more so than when he was being hunted by 9 late-stage golden core cultivators. Xianxia couldn't help but frown, trembling as he spoke. To calculate everything so precisely, even predicting that Chan Yuan would appear in Mongshan County. This might not just be the Emperor's doing, right? Your Tang Empire's emperors. None of them are good people. Chenzu Saintis didn't miss the chance to mock. She usually didn't care much about the internal affairs of the Tang Empire, but after hearing such a terrifying scheme, she couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine. Jian Wushuang remained calm. To him, it was merely a method to grow stronger. In the mundane world, such tactics were considered brilliant, a normal approach for a skilled strategist. In terms of advanced methods, he had seen far too many to be surprised, only curious about what made the Empress so special. Could it be that she could help someone ascend? In the Crimson Eyes realm, that might be the only thing that could fascinate people so much. News just came in from Xianxia Tower. Something major has happened in Taiyan City. The Tang Emperor has been deposed. Yang Xiao received the internal news from the Xianxia Guard and exclaimed in shock. But this matter was no longer important. Whether deposed or not, the other side was still a nascent soul-stage cultivator. Moreover, there were powerful figures with great abilities behind him, assisting with the planning and schemes. Has Wei Zhouxian arrived as well? Yang Xiao nodded, saying, the Grand Commander personally led the army and has already reached Mongshan County. They are not far from the county city. Tell him not to send mortals to their deaths. He should come alone, Jian Wushuang warned. Wei Zhouxian certainly knew more, and Jian Wushuang wanted to gather some information from him. No, the Grand Commander will not come to the county city. Yang Xiao shook his head and sighed. The Grand Commander is leading the army, most likely to intimidate the barbarian lands and the cultivators of the southern sky realm. Is he really not interested in this place at all? Xiangyang asked in surprise. Yang Xiao nodded. Yes, the Grand Commander is concerned with the welfare of the world. He has no interest in Ascension, which is also why the Tang Emperor targets him. What a pity! Jian Wushuang sighed slightly. Insignificant characters didn't matter whether they came or not. For now, finding the altar was the most pressing matter. While they were conversing, the second wave of forces from the 3 factions entered the county city. The first group had almost all perished, encountering a ghost commander within less than 100 feet of the city. Unfortunately, it was a mid-stage ghost commander, which spelled bad luck for them. They leisurely stood on the city walls watching the battle. The rest were not so fortunate. The 3 nascent soul cultivators of the second wave were dumbfounded by the scene before them as soon as they entered the city. Even Wang Lan was no exception. Penetrating deep into the county city seemed impossible unless all 3 factions entered together, paving a path of blood. Otherwise, relying solely on individual strength would only allow those at the divine aspect level to move freely in and out. Retreat! Wang Lan had no intention of delving deeper. As for the cultivators of the first wave, he couldn't be bothered with them. Since they weren't from his sect, he turned around and left. The other 2 nascent soul cultivators shared the same sentiment. Staying would serve no purpose and could lead to being dragged down by the powerful ghost cultivators. They immediately withdrew from the county city. They also called back the third wave, as sending them in would only mean certain death. They had gathered some information about the situation inside Mongshan County City. 50 miles away, in a massive ancient fortress, the nascent soul cultivators of the three major alliances had gathered, along with a few golden core cultivators. Is the entire county city filled with ghost cultivators? Upon hearing this news, everyone's first reaction was disbelief. They hadn't sensed anything from outside the city, which explained why the first wave had been so silent. It must have been a barrier that blocked everything. This is going to be difficult. A city full of ghost cultivators with quite a few at the nascent soul level. If we risk entering, the losses will be incalculable. The first to feel the headache was Miao Renfeng. His forces from the barbarian lands were numerous, and most of the powerful cultivators had gathered outside Mongshan County City. Even in the southern sky realm, many innate experts were outside Mongshan County. If a siege occurred, they would be at a disadvantage. Ghost cultivators? He muttered to himself and quickly came up with an idea. He immediately suggested, since they're ghost cultivators, ordinary innate warriors won't be of any use. I suggest gathering all cultivators above the golden core stage to storm the city. We may not be able to kill all the ghost cultivators, but at least we can find the main hall of the Qiang sect. Once we kill the key figures, the remaining ghost cultivators can be dealt with at our leisure. He had grasped the essence of Hua Xuejian's plan, speaking without leaving any loopholes. Hua Xuejian wasn't upset that his idea had been taken. Instead, he smiled and said, Chief Miao's suggestion is excellent. The most important thing now is to find the main hall of the demon sect so we can eliminate them in one fell swoop. Since they are ghost cultivators, only golden core stage cultivators and above can deal with them. I support this proposal. With two of them in agreement, it was down to Xianxia. He had no reason to refuse. Charging in together was the best option, saving them from internal strife. I agree as well. With all three in accord, the message was spread. An incense stick later, all the strong cultivators gathered to storm the city together. The call: eliminate demons and protect the Tao. The barbarian war horns sounded, signaling the charge. Over 1,000 golden core cultivators gathered in three groups, advancing in unison. Such a vast force of cultivators was the last remnant of ancient glory. Dozens of nascent soul cultivators also gathered. Over 1,000 golden core cultivators moved together toward Mongshan County City. As they entered, another horn echoed. Wei Jiuxian had arrived. He led his 1,000-strong army into battle. Besides Wei Jiuxian, Chong Feng led another army to the coastal southern Sky County. With the powerful cultivators on both sides absent, it was a slaughter feast. Blood stained the ground red. Although the warriors of the barbarian lands were brave and skilled in battle, they couldn't withstand the precision strikes of the Xianxia guards. Any innate warrior with significant strength was instantly killed. The rest were trampled by the overwhelming tide of the army. Together with the war beasts, they were ground into a pulp. This battle had no suspense. It was won decisively, fought with precision, and retreated swiftly. Wei Jiuxian stayed behind with the Xianxia guards. Inside the ancient fortress where the three forces had gathered earlier. Commander, the situation by the coast has also been resolved. Lord Chongfeng will be here shortly. Dressed in spotless white, Wei Jiuxian sat in the seat where Hua Xuejian had previously been. He nodded calmly, as if the earlier slaughter had not stirred him in the slightest. Have the 10 attendants been gathered? A shadowy figure replied truthfully. Number 10 is with Lord Chongfeng, and the others are outside waiting for orders. Good, very good. Wei Jiuxian nodded in satisfaction. Today's battle had pleased him greatly. He had taken the opportunity to eliminate the threats from the southern heavenly realm and the barbarian lands. As for Mongshan County, that place was a slaughterhouse. No matter how many people were sent, it would never be enough. Now they could only wait for the true mastermind to reveal themselves. His task was already half done. He had defended the Tang Empire as he was supposed to. The remaining half involved cleaning up internal affairs. At that moment, a report came from outside. A powerful presence was approaching. Before the words had even been fully spoken, that presence had already arrived. It was a woman dressed in white and green robes, exuding an incredibly cold aura. On her back was a divine sword brimming with immense power. Wei Zhouxian was slightly surprised when he saw her. He didn't know this person, but judging by her aura, she was far stronger than the nascent soul cultivators he had encountered before. She was most likely a grand cultivator at the divine transformation level. Yet Wei Zhouxian remained calm, showing no fear. He asked plainly, "What brings you here? You are quite powerful. Despite seeing me, you have managed to remain calm. That's rare." The cold woman unexpectedly praised Wei Zhouxian as she spoke. This left Wei Zhouxian even more perplexed. After pondering, he thought of Baoguang Temple. If there were two most mysterious places in the Chimu realm, the first would be the Northern Glacier, and the second would be Baoguang Temple. Because Baoguang Temple had a true immortal. Furthermore, it was widely rumored that the master who founded Baoguang Temple, Fan Xin, was a Huaying stage cultivator. But in Wei Zhouxian's view, this was not the case. The other party was definitely a Xinjiang stage cultivator. Otherwise, how could he have sealed another Xinjiang stage great cultivator over 1,000 years ago? Moreover, the sealed Xinjiang stage cultivator came from the Chenzu tribe, with strength that had already reached the peak of the Xinjiang stage, just one step away from shattering the void. Being able to seal such a person meant that this Tang dynasty son-in-law likely already possessed the strength to shatter the void. And the woman before him probably knew that master, Fan Xin. "Your praise is too much," Wei Zhouxian responded with a faint smile. The cold woman, however, rarely smiled and said, "You remind me of someone I once knew. I was going to search your soul, but now I've changed my mind." "Oh." Wei Zhouxian's lips curved into a smile as he said, "Although I haven't reached the Xinjiang stage, I have some confidence. Below Xinjiang, I am invincible. Above Xinjiang, it's a one-for-one exchange. Now that you've said that, you resemble him even more." The cold woman finished speaking, her eyes suddenly flashing, and a sharp sword gaze burst forth. The sudden and terrifying sword energy didn't make Wei Zhouxian panic. He simply waved his hand, dispersing the sword energy. Yet in his heart he was deeply shocked. Just a glance had made his arm numb. If they truly fought, he might not last 3 moves under her hand. However, he had a trump card, and the one-for-one exchange at the Xinjiang stage was not just empty talk. But this trump card wasn't something he could easily use. "Your strength is impressive, but you're still a bit short of trading lives with a Xinjiang stage cultivator." The cold woman finished speaking and turned to leave. At that moment, Wei Zhouxian stood up and asked, "May I know your name?" "Fu Qing." The cold woman spoke her name, then directly broke through the air and headed straight for Mongshan County. Wei Zhouxian chased to the entrance of the ancient castle, looking toward Mongshan County, when 2 more powerful auras flashed across the sky. The 2 Arhats have arrived. He wasn't surprised by this, as he had expected it. The Tang dynasty still had some trump cards, and he intended to make good use of them. One person alone couldn't sweep away this ancient snow. "Fan Xin, you should be arriving soon." Wei Zhouxian's eyes flashed as he gazed northward. Northern Glacier. The wind was biting, and this place was extremely unsuitable for mortal habitation, but it was a paradise for cultivators, because ancient glory was buried here. The scene of 10,000 immortals ascending seemed like it happened just yesterday. The perpetual snow had buried that glory beneath the glacier. In this white world, a black-clad figure stood out sharply. His face was haggard, but his eyes shone with a piercing light. "More than 1,000 years. It's enough. It's worth it." He took a step forward, directly ascending the 10,000 feet ice mountain. This was the extreme north of the Northern Glacier, the highest point in the world. From here, he looked down upon the entire Red Eyes realm. "Fan Xin, worldly desires be gone." The haggard monk clasped his hands together, silently reciting a Buddhist scripture. Golden light burst forth behind him. A surge of power erupted from the mountaintop, and countless rays of golden light shot into the white glacier. As the light pierced the glacier, it caused a massive tremor. Under the illumination of the Buddha's light, The silence of 10,000 years in this place was shattered. Countless cave dwellings collapsed within the glacier, and many cultivators in seclusion were startled awake. They hurriedly left their crumbling abodes and soared into the sky. Upon seeing the scene below, they all showed expressions of terror. Who is it? Who dares to destroy the heavenly mountain? Are they tired of living? Damn it! I've been in seclusion for 1,000 years, just grasping the mystery of breaking through to the Xianxia stage. Who disturbed me? Most of these wandering cultivators, who had been in seclusion for many years, didn't head to Mongshan County. There weren't many of them, but their strength wasn't weak. Each one was a Huaying stage cultivator. At that moment, they all looked toward the towering ice mountain and the golden light. Look, it's Buddha's light. Above the sky, the black-clad monk paid no attention to the wandering cultivators of the northern glacier. Instead, he silently closed his eyes. In the moment before closing his eyes, he took one last look at this world, recalling everything he had experienced. Once his eyes closed, the paths of man and ghost diverged, and heaven and earth were separated. This man was none other than the Tang dynasty's son-in-law, the founder of Baoguang Temple. If Jian Wushuang had seen him, he would have been astonished, for this man was none other than Fanshin, who had welcomed them into Baoguang Temple, known as Fanshin, also called Fanshin. Now that Fanshin and Fanshin were understood, his end had come. When he passed away, the world grew still, and the Buddha's light vanished. His life force drained away in an instant. The wandering cultivators of the northern glacier were stunned. Did he just die like that? They couldn't comprehend it. If it had been a powerful force from the heavenly mountain, there should have been some movement. Yet, there was none, and the man simply perished. An inexplicable fear began to rise in their hearts. I feel a great terror. I feel it too. It's as if it's right beneath the glacier. At that moment, someone recognized who Fanqing was and exclaimed, "He is Fanshin from 1,000 years ago, now reborn as Fanqing. Isn't he the love-struck monk from the Tang dynasty?" That's right. Everyone seemed to understand in a daze. 1,000 years ago, that lucky young man had received a legacy within the glacier, and his strength skyrocketed. Not only did he establish the prosperity of the Tang dynasty, but he also once sealed a top-tier divine warrior. Yet now he had fallen silently. It was evidently related to the legacy he had once received. As waves of shock rippled through their hearts, Tianshan suddenly trembled, and a terrifying aura erupted from the depths of the earth. Everyone swallowed hard. There's something down there. That aura is the source of the terror. A nascent soul stage cultivator stared in horror at the crack in Tianshan. At this moment, a beam of white light appeared in the distance, revealing a man dressed in white with a tall crown. When he saw Fanqing's corpse, he couldn't help but sigh. I'm too late. This man was Xianxia from Baoguang Temple, a close friend of Fanqing. Moreover, he had another identity, an upper realm cultivator. He was known as Xianxia because in the upper realm, he truly was an immortal. You shouldn't have fallen like this. Your talent far surpassed mine. If I had asked my master to descend, he would have certainly taken you away. Why did you insist on repaying a favor to an ancient demon? He sighed deeply. This was something he couldn't understand, perhaps because he came from the upper realm. Mortals valued karma, and cultivators also placed importance on it. However, no matter how great the karma, it shouldn't block one's path to cultivation. Yet Fanqing was willing to die to fulfill his karma. In the eyes of true cultivators, this was a foolish act. Years ago, Fanqing had benefited from the ancient demon and promised to release the demon after deciphering the secret technique. But he had one condition: not to harm mortals. The ancient demon could slaughter cultivators across the world, but it had to leave a path for mortals. Both sides verbally agreed. Fanqing repaid his debt, but the ancient demon might not honor its promise. Therefore, Xianxia believed Fanqing was too foolish and naive. Now that the ancient demon had awakened, who knew if peace would still reign in this world? Sigh, I hope you don't go too far. Xianxia sighed, glanced at the terrifying ancient demon about to break free from the ice, and then turned to leave. He needed to return to the upper realm. Besides seeking help from the experts in his sect, he could also shatter the void and leave on his own, though the power required was immense. Initially, he had intended for Fanching to help, but Fanching had been determined to die. Now he had to rely on himself. However, the area around Mongshan County was a viable option. Besides, his junior sister had already gone there. It was time for him to return and clean up the mess, to obtain that power and rise again. Xianxia left lightly, but the scattered cultivators of the northern glacier were in a dire situation. It was too late to escape now. The ancient demon shattered the glacier, and a sharp claw extended out, instantly crushing a nascent soul stage cultivator. Roar! The fresh blood made the ancient demon incredibly excited. It let out a howl and freed its entire body from Tianshan. Curse the divine Eye clan! The ancient demon broke free from the ice mountain, fully revealing itself between heaven and earth. It stood 100 zhang tall, with 9 heads, 8 arms, and 6 legs. Each head was grotesque, but none had eyes. Only a large, bloody mouth. The ancient demon's eyes were located on its chest. It was a blood-red pupil like a giant fireball, blindingly bright. It gazed at the cultivators who had inherited the divine eye's legacy, and the blood-red eye immediately shot out a beam of light. The cultivators struck by it were instantly reduced to dust. The ancient demon absorbed both the strength and blood of its prey, leaving behind only a pile of ashes that had once been a body. Ha 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 ha! The taste of blood. I haven't savored it in so long. The living beings of this world shall all become my nourishment. The ancient demon cackled. It rampaged across the entire northern region glacier, madly hunting down cultivators. Despite its massive frame, its speed was anything but slow. With each stride, it covered 100 miles. The nascent soul cultivators scattered in all directions, trying to escape, but 90% of them still perished. Only a lucky few managed to survive. But they knew that peace would no longer exist in this world. Even if they escaped now, once the ancient demon set its sights on them, there would be no hiding within the Red Eye's realm. The demon would traverse the entire realm in no time, and eventually, it would hunt down every last cultivator. Despite the overwhelming despair, as long as there was even a sliver of hope, they would fight for it. The Dao leader is in the eastern land of the Tang dynasty. We must quickly join forces with him. The ancient demon shouldn't head to the Tang dynasty right away. Everyone scatter and flee. We'll regroup in the Tang dynasty. Agreed. The surviving nascent soul cultivators nodded in unison before dispersing in different directions, each fleeing with all their might. As expected, the ancient demon didn't immediately chase after them. Instead, it turned its destructive focus on the northern region glacier. The millennia-old profound ice was shattered to pieces by the demon's 8 arms. With its blood-red eyes, the demon transformed the entire glacier into a vast ocean. This was the true power of the ancient demon, far beyond what could be achieved by merely shattering space. The demon now possessed strength that surpassed even the divine manifestation realm. Divine Eye inheritance? The ancient demon wrapped its 8 arms around a colorful grand hall, lifting it straight from the ocean's depths. So, this is the inheritance of the 3rd sequence. No wonder I was sealed in this place. Among the 108 ancient domains, 108 gods and demons were born. 72 of them were slain, and the remaining ones must have been sealed by the divine Eye clan. The ancient demon was highly intelligent. It had once been a powerful being from the upper realm, part of the oldest batch of innate creatures. These special life forms had genes far superior to those of acquired creatures. Their innate divine power was 1,000 times stronger than that of ordinary people. When the world first formed, each ancient demon had access to limitless resources and quickly cultivated to great heights. But as the human race's numbers grew and their comprehension abilities increased, they rose up despite lacking the divine power of the ancient demons. Their rise was so rapid that the ancient demons didn't even have time to react. One must understand that each time an ancient demon slumbered, it was for tens of thousands of years or even longer. They never considered humans a threat, treating them like livestock to be raised. But by the time they realized what was happening, humanity had already produced superpowers that could rival them. And their numbers continued to grow. When the ancient demons tried to suppress them, the humans banded together and established the Heavenly Court. Back then, the Heavenly Court was ruled by those who inherited the Divine Eye. These inheritors possessed heaven-defying strength. Not only did they catch up to the ancient demons, but they quickly surpassed them. In just tens of thousands of years, the era of the ancient demons crumbled. One by one, the ancient demons were slain, and the ancient domains fell into human hands. In the end, the last 36 ancient demons fought desperately. Even though they lost, they shattered their ancient domains, refusing to leave them for the human cultivators. Thus, the ancient domains were broken. For the ancient demons, the destruction of their domains was akin to self-destruction. After the destruction of the ancient domain, his strength significantly declined. Eventually, he was suppressed one by one, or slain and refined into magical artifacts. The ancient demon's entire body was considered a treasure, especially his blood. This was the reason why the humans later launched a frenzied attack on the ancient demons. Fortunately, at that time, internal problems also arose within the Heavenly Court. A strong expert of the Divine Eye clan suddenly fell, and much of the Divine Eye inheritance was reclaimed. This finally halted the siege of the ancient demons. The reason he survived was due to the later suppression. He was suppressed by an unparalleled sword Immortal in the Crimson Eye realm. The artifact used to suppress him was none other than the third sequence Divine Eye Inheritance Hall. He harbored deep hatred for this hall. After all, the rise of the humans back then was due to the inheritance of the Divine Eye clan. Later, his own suppression was also due to the Divine Eye clan, so he despised the Divine Eye inheritance. He yearned to shatter this Divine Eye Inheritance Hall. However, when he realized it was the third sequence Inheritance Hall, he gave up. Even in the higher realms, this third sequence Inheritance Hall was the top-level Divine Eye Inheritance, one he couldn't possibly break. Even the one who suppressed him back then couldn't break it. Otherwise, that person wouldn't have used this hall to suppress him. If I can't destroy it, I'll use you to obliterate the entire Crimson Eye realm. The ancient demon let out a sinister laugh, completely unconcerned about the promise he made to the mortal world. After all, it was just an exchange. Without his help, the mortals back then would have perished long ago, and there would have been no glory for the Tang dynasty. In fact, the glory of the Tang dynasty was all his doing. The ancient demon's massive eyes shifted, and his thought power spread over 10,000 miles, sensing that those fleeing cultivators were all heading towards the Tang dynasty. From the direction of the eastern lands, he felt a familiar aura, one that also came from the ancient demon's bloodline. Could there still be members of my clan in the Crimson Eye realm? The ancient demon was initially stunned, but then he was delighted to discover that the presence with an aura similar to his own no longer had any life force. It was clearly a dead thing. Who would have thought my luck would be this good? As long as I absorb that power, I can restore my peak strength. Even without the innate ancient domain, I could still head to the upper realm and seize another ancient domain. Then, I'll settle the score with the Divine Eye clan and those inheritors. Having made up his mind, he lifted the entire Divine Eye Inheritance Hall and flew up toward the 9 heavens. Let's start with some interest. The ancient demon raised the Inheritance Hall and smashed it directly onto the Chaos Realm in the 9 heavens. That space was the hardest within the entire Crimson Eye realm. Back in the day, not a single deity who ascended by shattering the void had been able to break through the Chaos Void. They all ascended by breaking through the space below the 9 heavens. Among them, the best could only shatter the first heaven or, at most, the second heaven. It was rumored that someone who had received the complete Divine Eye inheritance managed to break through the 9th heaven space. However, the 9th heaven space ultimately still belonged to the Crimson Eye realm, while the Chaos Void did not. It belonged to a higher-level world. Once shattered, the Ascendant might not even reach the 72 ancient domains. Of course, this was only speculation. But now, he intended to make it a reality. By shattering the Chaos Void and introducing chaotic energy, he would turn the Crimson Eye realm into a dead world. Smash it for me! Boom! The ancient demon lifted the divine eye inheritance hall and struck the chaos realm with force. Instantly, the entire world trembled. Not just the northern region, but the entire Crimson Eye realm quaked. The ancient demon looked at the chaos realm, slightly surprised to find that not a single crack had appeared. That strike should have been powerful enough to shatter the 9 heavens. Yet, it hadn't left even the slightest mark on the chaos realm. Damn it! My strength is being too heavily suppressed. If it weren't for the suppression of the heavenly Tao, I could have shattered this chaos realm with just a casual strike. The ancient demon struck the chaos realm several more times but still failed to break through. Frustrated, he gave up. If I can't break the chaos realm, then I'll shatter the 9 heavens. From now on, there will be no more ascendants from this world. The ancient demon let out a wicked laugh, descended into the 9 heavens, and smashed the divine eye inheritance hall directly into them. Rumble. This time, the impact was even greater. The entire Crimson Eye realm trembled for the time it took an incense stick to burn, causing flat lands to suddenly give rise to mountain ranges, while places that had been mountains became deep chasms. This great supernatural power that altered the landscape led to countless deaths among mortals. But the most terrifying part was yet to come. The shattered 9 heavens turned into fragments of space, falling from the sky. Countless black spatial crystals rained down on the world. With the 9 heavens shattered, the fragments of space fused with the human world, making what had been a fragile space several times stronger. As a result, all cultivators lost the hope of shattering the void and ascending. From then on, Ascension became a distant dream. Yet, the people deep within Mongshan County City were completely unaware of the changes outside. However, one immortal who exuded an aura of true divinity ground his teeth as he watched the black rain droplets fall from the sky, angrily declaring, "Just wait. If you dare go to the upper realm, I'll be sure to cut you down." His anger wasn't over the shattering of the 9 heavens or the fact that the Crimson Eye realm could no longer produce ascendants. What enraged him was that the 3rd sequence inheritance hall had been fused into the shattered 9 heavens. As a result, it would be much harder for him to enter the 3rd sequence divine eye inheritance hall. He had come to the Crimson Eye realm precisely for that inheritance hall. And now, that foolish ancient demon had tossed it into the fragmented space. Although it appeared to be floating in the sky, entering it now would require matching space fragments. But those fragments had already fused with the ground space. Finding matching fragments would be as difficult as climbing to the heavens. This is a big problem. The Immortal and his junior sister, Fu Qing, stood guard outside the ancient fortress. Wei Jiuxian also looked up at the falling raindrops, but his expression showed no fear. It was as if everything had been within his expectations. Seeing his expression, the Immortal seemed to have guessed something and asked, "Did Fanqing leave you a backup plan?" "Just a small trick," Wei Jiuxian replied calmly. The Immortal sighed, "Then don't do anything unnecessary. Use whatever tricks you have left and flee quickly. That ancient demon once ruled an ancient domain. His strength is beyond comparison with you mortals." "How would I know if I don't try?" Wei Jiuxian's tone was firm. The Immortal and Fu Qing exchanged a glance, both showing a hint of pride in their eyes, a disdain for mortals. They came from the upper realm and knew more. In the entire Crimson Eye realm, they only acknowledged Fanqing. The upper realm's power was not as simple as those legends made it out to be. It was so powerful that mortals couldn't even begin to imagine it. The upper realm now was no longer the era of the ancient demon. Most of the records in the legends belonged to the time when humanity united to fight against the ancient demon, a time long past. Though it was now countless times stronger, their power was still suppressed in the lower realm. While the ancient demon's strength was also suppressed by the heavenly Tao, his base power was 1,000 times that of the human race. They were still no match for him. To win, they had to pay a price. That price might lead to their downfall. If it comes to it, I'll crush the token my master gave me. With his power, descending to this realm would be effortless, and he could easily kill the ancient demon and obtain the inheritance hall. Xianxia steeled his resolve. But unless absolutely necessary, he wouldn't crush the token, because it concerned his standing within the sect. Moreover, this kind of assistance token, he only had one. Once used, it would be gone. Who knew when he would get another? If he needed his master's help even in the mortal world, he wouldn't be able to hold his head high among his peers. Senior brother, it seems there's some movement in the city. Fu Qing frowned as he looked toward the city. Xianxia also turned his gaze. With a thought, he sensed that the soul power within the city was rapidly increasing. His eyes immediately froze, and he exclaimed in surprise, "What's going on? Why is the soul power of those cultivators who entered Mongshan County City increasing so rapidly?" With his thought power, he pierced through the barrier that isolated Mongshan County and sensed that the soul power of the cultivators within the city was growing at a staggering rate. Several of the cultivators in the nascent soul stage had already reached the god aspect level in terms of soul power. This development shocked him even more than the ancient demon he had seen earlier, because the increase in soul power was permanent. I never imagined that such a secret method existed in the mortal world. Junior sister, let's hurry inside. Xianxia was ecstatic. He had realized that after those cultivators killed the ghost cultivators, they automatically absorbed the ghost cultivators' soul power, which was the reason for their rapid increase in soul power. And the cause of all this was the barrier around Mongshan County. Though it was called a barrier, it was more like a grand formation. The ghost cultivators devoured each other, creating stronger ghost cultivators. All because of this formation. After Xianxia finished speaking, Fu Qing's expression also changed. Soul cultivation methods were the most mysterious of all cultivation methods. Even in the upper realms, they were top-tier secret techniques, and neither of them had ever practiced a complete soul cultivation method. Therefore, their soul power was only one level higher than their current realm. It wasn't considered top-tier, but practicing a soul cultivation method could amplify their soul power, allowing them to fully exert the power of their realm. In their understanding, this was how soul power was used. However, when one reached the immortal emergence stage, soul power would be used differently. Because immortal emergence cultivators could control certain aspects of the heavenly Tao, which required even higher levels of soul power. At the level of an emperor, mastering the Tao and controlling a vast world required even more soul power. Thus, they would all cultivate soul secret techniques to amplify their thought power, enabling them to control the Tao. But this amplification wasn't intrinsic. It was similar to Jian Wushuang's ancient transformation technique, where the amplification required greater consumption of power, but the actual divine power hadn't increased. Only by amplifying one's own divine power was it truly significant. Soul power was the same. Only an increase in essence was truly useful. Once their soul power surpassed their realm by 2 levels, the two of them could undoubtedly enter the core of their sect and become the Tao successors of their generation, allowing them to practice even more powerful secret techniques. The only downside was that this was the mortal world. Therefore, they were even more eager to obtain this formation that raised ghost cultivators. If they acquired it, they wouldn't need to ask their master to descend. Even inviting the strongest expert in their sect would be met with no resistance, and they would even be rewarded. But there was one thing they needed to ascertain in advance: whether this grand formation had higher-level applications. If it didn't, its value would decrease significantly. However, it could still be used to cultivate lower-level disciples, which would be a significant contribution. In any case, it would rival the value of his token. That was Xianxia's plan. Meanwhile, inside the ancient castle, Wei Jiuxian listened in confusion, merely watching the two leave without following them. He had more important matters to attend to in this place. Inside Mongshan County City, Jian Wushuang, who hadn't appeared for a long time, sat cross-legged on the city wall, watching the cultivators and ghost cultivators fighting, but showed no interest, because his soul realm was too high. Within the 9-prison pagoda, his soul realm had already reached the immortal emergence level. In the mortal world, it had also reached the peak of the god aspect realm. There was no need for him to kill these ghost cultivators to enhance his soul realm. However, Xiangyang and Jiangshang needed it, as did Yangshao and Chenzu Saintus. Under his guidance, they had all gone down early to kill ghost cultivators. In fact, he had discovered this benefit from the start, but he didn't feel the need to mention it because it had nothing to do with what he wanted. But now that he couldn't find the altar, he sent them down to kill ghost cultivators, thinking that if all the ghost cultivators were eliminated, perhaps they would find the answer. Unfortunately, he could only rely on this clumsy method to explore for now. Swoosh! Two powerful auras soared into the sky, instantly descending upon the county city of Mongshan. The intensity of these auras far exceeded that of Immortal Jiuchun earlier. They were undoubtedly strong experts in the Xianxia realm. Two more Xianxia have appeared, making it 4 in total. The depths of the Tang dynasty's hidden powers are truly astounding. Jian Wushuang rubbed his temples in surprise. Earlier, 2 monks had arrived, both in the early stages of Xianxia with average strength. But this time, the 2 Xianxia who had arrived were at least in the later stages. They immediately plunged into the vast group of ghost cultivators and began to fight fiercely. Their speed in slaying was far faster than those from the 3 major forces. Among the 3 forces, the strongest were only in the early and mid stages of Xianxia. As for the Southern Heaven realm, they had the grandest display yet the weakest strength, without a single Xianxia. They were undoubtedly the most awkward party. The 3 major forces each divided into 3 areas. The 2 Arhats went to another area. The later arriving Xianxia and Fu Qing went to the central area. But even so, the pace of the siege was still insufficient. To completely annihilate all the ghost cultivators would take at least another hour. This won't do. The demon in the sky won't give them that much time. Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. He had sensed the demon breaking the seal in the sky earlier. Although there was a barrier in this place, it couldn't completely block his detection. If even Xianxia and Fu Qing could feel what was happening within the city from the outside, there was no way Jian Wushuang wouldn't notice. He was surprised when he sensed the demon's emergence. How could a mortal world bear the existence of a demon? But upon realizing that the demon's strength was also suppressed, he felt relieved. Even he was being suppressed by this world, let alone that demon. It seems I'll have to step in myself. Though he didn't care much for that bit of soul power, he had no choice but to take action now. As long as he found the altar and obtained that power, he could rapidly absorb it and reach the peak of the Xianxia realm. By then, that demon would no longer be his match. Despite being in a mortal body, every time his strength grew, he could access tens of thousands more secret techniques and divine abilities, all of which were top tier. Slaying a divine demon of the same level was simply effortless. The difference wasn't so obvious during the infant formation stage, but once one reached the divine aspect realm, it was a leap forward. This was because the secret techniques recorded in his mind were all at least at the myriad phenomena level, and with his powerful soul, he could only begin cultivating them at the divine aspect realm. The small techniques he used before weren't even considered secret techniques in his eyes. However, burning thought power didn't count, as it didn't depend on the realm or strength, but rather on soul power. Chun Yuan, don't move around here. I'll be back soon, Jian Wushuang instructed before he soared into the sky. He flew directly toward the center of the city. At this moment, he didn't bother to hide his aura anymore and openly appeared above the 2 divine aspect realm experts. Xianxia and Fu Qing sensed Jian Wushuang's aura and only slightly frowned, thinking that Jian Wushuang was being a bit presumptuous for daring to come into their territory to seize ghost cultivators. They originally intended to teach him a lesson, but in the next moment, a terrifying wave of thought power descended upon the entire city. Burning thought power! Jian Wushuang shouted softly. All his thought power erupted simultaneously, burning multiple times over, and the terrifying pressure instantly caused all the ghost cultivators in the city to stand dazed and motionless. Destroy! With one hand, Jian Wushuang struck down, and the giant palm print formed from thought power descended like a divine weapon from the heavens. In just one move, he crushed 90% of the ghost cultivators. Among them was even a ghost commander who possessed divine aspect realm soul power. Yet even so, Jian Wushuang easily crushed him to death. If it were a true divine aspect realm expert, it might not have been possible to crush the opponent, but since it was just a spiritual body, he had no difficulty dealing with it. This move shocked all the cultivators, causing cold sweat to break out on their backs. At the same time, all eyes turned towards Jian Wushuang in the sky. Xianxia and Fu Qing were no exception, their eyes filled with disbelief. The suppression from the thought power just now had shaken them both, extinguishing any thoughts of resistance. Took them several breaths to react. Such powerful thought power pressure absolutely surpassed the divine aspect realm. Xianxia stared at Jian Wushuang's figure and exclaimed, "Could he have already reached the myriad phenomena realm? Impossible! The heavenly laws of the mortal world absolutely do not allow the existence of the myriad phenomena realm. Once someone reaches that level, they would be annihilated unless they became a transcendent," Fu Qing retorted. But the reality was right in front of them, and they had no choice but to believe it. Could he already be a transcendent being? However, that aura couldn't deceive them. Jian Wushuang's aura was very weak, only at the infant formation stage. If it weren't for the lack of time, he could have gone outside to absorb those scattered spatial crystals. But gathering them was too troublesome, unlike the ones he had obtained from Immortal Zhou Chun, which were already refined. Those large chunks couldn't be found even if he scoured the entire Mongshan County. Even if he were lucky enough to find spatial crystals similar to the ones before, after absorbing them, he would at most advance to the early divine aspect stage, which still wouldn't be enough to fight against divine demons. He had to obtain the power within the altar. But even with such powerful thought power, he still couldn't locate the altar, making him more anxious than anyone. Ignoring the shocked expressions of the others, his thought power continued to probe the city of Mongshan County. The remaining ghost cultivators were quickly exterminated by the cultivators. After all, anything that could enhance the soul was something everyone desired. The vast city, now empty of ghost cultivators, had become much quieter. The remaining cultivators began searching for the altar. Some even started destroying houses to search for it. Xianxia and Fu Qing, however, lost interest and prepared to leave. But before they could, they wanted to probe Jian Wushuang a little. Yet, before they could make a move, Jian Wushuang unleashed a terrifying burst of thought power that pushed them back. Fools! That divine demon is still watching from outside. If you don't find the altar quickly, when that demon arrives, you'll all be doomed. Jian Wushuang was growing irritated. He wouldn't die, nor would Jiangshang or Xiangyang. Because he had the 9-prison pagoda, at worst, he could have the soul avatar within the pagoda create an opening and let them take refuge inside the treasure. With the defensive power of this treasure, not to mention that divine demon outside, even if a Dian Immortal came, they wouldn't be able to break it. But doing so would make shattering the void much more difficult. He feared they would be trapped for a very, very long time. He didn't want to be trapped, especially at this mortal stage. Because at this stage, he couldn't enhance his original body's strength. If his original body were trapped, he could still cultivate and increase his power to break free. But now that his original body was gone, getting trapped would just waste time, and the strength gained wouldn't help his original body at all. Moreover, he wanted to explore this world, not be imprisoned within it. After being scolded, Xianxia and Fu Qing were momentarily stunned, then sneered, "Humph! It's just a small altar. Even if it's found, what can it do? We thought with your strong thought power you'd be more knowledgeable. Turns out you're just a frog in a well. Do you not recognize an ancient demon? That's an innate being born from the ancient domain. Even if you reach the peak of the divine aspect realm, you won't be a match. Let me tell you something else. Don't even think about shattering the void. The space on the ground now is even more solid than the 9 heavens back then. Even if you reach the peak of the divine aspect realm, you still won't be able to break through the space to leave." A frog in a well. Jian Wushuang chuckled at himself. He could tell that the souls and realms of the two before him were suppressed. They were undoubtedly strong beings from the upper world. He once thought the upper world was vast, and even considered it a low-level chaotic world. But now it seemed either that world was too weak, or the cultivators there were too foolish, lacking any insight. The so-called ancient demon was just an innate divine demon, which was the common term in the outside world. Also, this altar here was far from simple. If it were merely the power sealed at the peak of the divine aspect realm, how could he not have found it? The key issue was that this place's array was special. It allowed ghost cultivators to devour one another and grow. Such a unique array, nurturing so many ghost cultivators, had not just appeared today. From the time Xianxia noticed something odd about this place, at least 10 days had passed. Judging by Jian Wushuang's calculations, the ghost commanders who appeared tonight had just advanced. This meant that the ghost cultivators who had previously advanced had already been taken away. And the purpose of nurturing so many ghost cultivators was to resurrect the imperial concubine. So what was the deal with the altar's power? The two didn't seem to be connected, but upon deeper consideration, one could deduce that the imperial concubine was just a pawn, and her resurrection was to benefit that Tang Emperor. The altar's power had likely already fallen into Tang Emperor's hands. That was why he had yet to make an appearance. Besides all this, Jian Wushuang also sensed a peculiar aura from those ghost cultivators. One that was very similar to that of divine demons. It was evident that the altar not only sealed divine power but also possibly contained the power of gods and demons. Once this power was obtained, not just Jian Wushuang, but even if Xiangyang and Jiangshang combined their strength, they wouldn't be able to fully consume it. Even the cultivators in the city, who had significantly increased their soul strength by killing ghost cultivators, could reach the level of shattering the void if they acquired this power of gods and demons. Even though space had become more solid than before, it could still be shattered with the power of gods and demons. However, Jian Wushuang was too lazy to explain these things to the others. Whether they understood it or not depended on themselves. He didn't care if they stayed or left, but if anyone dared to cause trouble, he wouldn't hesitate to act. Xianxia and Fu Qing coldly snorted but had no intention of leaving. Although they didn't fully understand the situation, they also chose to search for the altar. At that moment, in the southern part of the city, after a 2-story pavilion was overturned, a wave of death energy surged out. Simultaneously, a similar event occurred in the southwest. Jian Wushuang's thought power instantly gathered. By focusing on the two locations, he quickly noticed something unusual. There's actually a hidden formation here. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows twitched, and he immediately transmitted his thoughts. Xiangyang, take Jiangshang and head to the city wall quickly. Both Xiangyang and Jiangshang were only cultivators at the golden core stage. If they encountered danger, they could easily be killed in an instant. The city wasn't lacking in golden core cultivators, so it would be safer for them to head to the city wall. Without hesitation, Xiangyang and Jiangshang flew directly towards the city wall. Meanwhile, cellars emitting death energy continued to appear throughout the city. That death energy quickly spread across the entire county city. A death energy formation, ghost cultivators, and the altar. Jian Wushuang began to see through the intentions of the mastermind behind this. It wasn't just about resurrecting the imperial concubine. It seemed more like a case of possession by borrowing a corpse to return to life. As for the imperial concubine, she was merely an appetizer. 108 cellars, forming the foundation of this grand formation. The person who set this up is no ordinary figure, Jian Wushuang calmly remarked. He wasn't afraid of the opponent's methods. What he feared was the opponent hiding and not coming out. Now that the formation had appeared, it wouldn't be long before the opponent showed themselves. The exposure of the formation provided Jian Wushuang with an opportunity. To Jian Wushuang, formations weren't overly complicated. The core of this formation wasn't just the 108 cellars, but rather the death energy. That was the key to driving the formation. As long as he suppressed the death energy, he could stop the formation from operating, and at that point the opponent would surely emerge to confront him. However, Jian Wushuang wasn't planning to do that. He was more interested in seeing what the opponent was up to. Who was this formation meant to bring back to life through possession? So he didn't rush to take action. But the other cultivators panicked, starting to suppress the death energy from the cellars. In groups of 3 or 5, they formed simple battle formations to suppress the cellars. Unfortunately, there weren't enough people, and they could only suppress a dozen or so cellars at most. This merely slowed down the formation's operation but couldn't stop it. Neither Xianxia nor Fu Qing took action to suppress the formation. They remained silent. Everyone wanted to wait. Jian Wushuang returned to the city wall, observing the scene within the city, his thought power constantly monitoring the cultivators throughout the city. Wushuang, this formation seems strange, especially that death energy. Why do I feel like it's similar to when we first entered this place? Xianxia gazed at the surging death energy, revealing a puzzled expression. The death energy was indeed similar to the one that erupted when they first entered, but back then, it was far more intense than what was present here. The most important difference was that the death energy back then contained a special aura. It was somewhat different from the death energy here. It's somewhat similar, but it's not a big deal. Jian Wushuang explained to Xianxia. Do you remember those demons we encountered before entering this place? If I'm not mistaken, those demons were tricked and slaughtered in life, and many of them were killed, which is why so much death energy gathered. Ambushed and killed? But those creatures included universe gods at the 6-star level. Xianxia exclaimed in shock, momentarily forgetting to communicate through thought transmission. Yang Xiao and the others were stunned when they heard the term universe god. The Qianzu scientists hadn't followed Miao Renfeng's barbarian lands tribe, believing that sticking with Jian Wushuang might reveal more useful information. However, what she heard now left her completely baffled. Universe gods? What kind of existence was that? These people might have lived their entire lives without even hearing of the universe, let alone understanding the immense power of a universe god. Jian Wushuang ignored their confusion and calmly explained, the ghosts here can devour and evolve, so it's likely the same principle applies to those creatures as well. Ah, that makes sense. But even so, the one who ambushed and killed those creatures must have been a universe god. Otherwise, how could they have subdued such beings? Xianxia still seemed worried. Although he hadn't yet regained much of his strength, he was concerned about the future. If there truly were incomparably powerful universe gods in this world, he wouldn't stand a chance. At his peak, he had only reached the 9th tribulation as a universe master. His power as a demigod had already reached its limit. As for universe gods above 6-star level, he didn't even dare to imagine confronting such beings. There's no need to overthink. If this world really is filled with powerful universe gods, it wouldn't make much difference whether you leave or stay. Jian Wushuang reassured him. Indeed, Xianxia was merely a 9th tribulation universe master. If this world contained super-powerful universe gods, his cultivation here would be no different from training in the outside world. Besides, the Xiang family had already perished, and leaving might only lead to his enemies pursuing him for revenge. If there were better opportunities here, staying and cultivating in this world could be a more viable option. Just like Xing Luo, who, despite having access to a larger world, chose to return here. Likely due to a certain legacy that couldn't be further enhanced in the outside world, it was better to return and continue strengthening himself in this realm. Xianxia might as well cling to this opportunity. Staying here and becoming a son-in-law might be 100 times better than leaving. Of course, he didn't voice this thought. After chatting with Xianxia for a while, Jian Wushuang continued to observe Mongshan County. Unlike Xianxia, Jian Wushuang's true self was incredibly powerful, already at the peak of the 9-star universe god level. Once he regained his strength, not only this world but even the realm god continent couldn't hold him back. The most crucial point was that entering this world seemed to be part of someone's plan. The prophet. This mighty figure could erase some people's memories, but not his. The prophet had helped him several times, and this time, entering this place was also connected to that person. For example, the strong figure who destroyed the Eastern True Immortal Realm was also known as the prophet, and Jian Wushuang had even dreamed of the prophet. Now that he had obtained the 9-prison pagoda, he was even more certain that entering this world was no mere coincidence. The prophet must have been scheming something. The Crimson Eye realm was just the first challenge. What he needed to do was find a way to gain benefits that would strengthen his true self. At the very least, the 9-prison pagoda was no ordinary treasure. It was far more than it seemed. Obtaining this treasure was likely part of the prophet's plan all along. Now, with all the cultivators of the Red-Eyed Realm gathered here, and one ancient legend after another emerging, it was clear that a hidden hand was orchestrating everything. But he still wondered if he was the protagonist of this story. Buzz. While his mind was swirling with countless thoughts, a sudden change occurred within the city. The deathly aura that filled the sky began to coalesce, and a powerful force erupted from it. What is that? Jian Wushuang looked up at the clouds within the city and immediately sensed a strong spiritual force emanating from within. Swish! Countless soul bodies suddenly shot out from the underground chambers, surging into the clouds along with the deathly aura. These soul bodies were different from the ghostly cultivators previously in the city. They were more complete. They were no longer at the level of ghost commanders, for a king character was etched upon their chests. Are these ghost kings? From 108 underground chambers, 108 ghost kings emerged, each one a soul at the level of a divine general. Combined with the soul force already present in the clouds, the fusion unleashed an unprecedented spiritual power. Witnessing this, Jian Wushuang, Xianxia, and Fu Qing knew they couldn't stand idly by. This grand formation could very well give birth to a peerless existence, one that might rival the ancient demon. In an instant, they couldn't afford to hold back any longer, each of them making their move to intercept the fusing souls. Xianxia began with the Kunlun divine form. A towering, majestic mountain suddenly crashed down from the sky, and just as the ethereal immortal energy spread, it was obliterated by the heavenly Tao. Yet even so, this towering mountain had already reached the peak of divine form combat power. Shake the Kunlun! Xianxia roared, forming hand seals, and the towering mountain smashed into the clouds. Numerous secret techniques were employed by various nascent soul cultivators and even some divine form cultivators. But these techniques were not enough to shake the deathly cloud. Even when the towering mountain struck it, it didn't stir a single ripple. This made everyone anxious. The soul force within the clouds grew stronger. A pair of blood-red eyes gradually formed within the clouds. Sister, don't hold back. Strike now and suppress that soul force. Whatever you do, don't let it fully manifest. I have a feeling that once it forms, it might break free from the heavenly Tao. Xianxia was extremely worried. That pressure beyond the heavenly Tao was all too familiar to him. He had been following their master for a long time, and he was well aware of this aura. Hearing her senior brother's words, Fu Qing no longer hesitated. She drew the divine sword from her back, battle intent rising between her brows. Heaven-splitting sword art. With a soft cry, her divine sword unleashed a power capable of shattering the void. In an instant, 10,000 sword lights burst forth. As the sword lights shot out, they quickly converged into a colossal, tangible divine sword, 100 meters long, thrusting fiercely towards the clouds. The previous wave of attacks couldn't compare to the power of this single strike. Even Jian Wushuang, standing on the city walls, was a bit surprised by the sharpness of this woman's sword technique. It carried a similar intensity to his own in the past. She was a remarkable sword prodigy. But unfortunately, it still wasn't enough to deal with the deathly cloud. Although the sword managed to pierce the cloud, the battle intent was instantly consumed by thought power upon entering. Without the battle intent, the heaven-splitting sword was like a blade without an edge. It lost its sword essence. It immediately shattered and disintegrated. Yet the deathly cloud felt the threat and began absorbing the ghost kings even faster. Soon, the cloud transformed into a humanoid figure. This was a massive soul body, 10,000 meters tall, and in its hand, a soul-summoning banner appeared. I am the Ghost Emperor, the soul body declared, waving the soul-summoning banner. The moment it was swung, the banner released countless ghostly wails, and an attack that pierced the soul instantly rendered all the nascent soul cultivators present powerless, leaving them standing dazed and immobile. Jian Wushuang's thought power easily blocked the crude soul attack. His thought power shield even extended to protect several golden core stage cultivators. Observing the scene before him, Jian Wushuang remained calm and composed. When he first sensed something was amiss, he anticipated that the deathly cloud might give birth to a terrifying entity. However, he hadn't expected that the Ghost Emperor it formed would be capable of launching a soul attack. But it made sense. After all, the Ghost Emperor was a soul entity, and its only means of attack would be through soul attacks, which happened to be its specialty. The intense soul attack swept across a large number of cultivators. If it weren't for the soul power boost Jian Wushuang gained from slaying the ghost cultivators earlier, even nascent soul stage cultivators would have perished en masse. Even so, the attack wiped out the souls of all cultivators below the nascent soul stage, claiming their lives. Not even those at the peak of the golden core stage were spared. This wide-range attack was somewhat similar to Jian Wushuang's previous thought power burn, but there was one key difference. The opponent couldn't compare to Jian Wushuang. After all, Jian Wushuang had the power to annihilate even a ghost commander at the nascent soul stage. This was because Jian Wushuang's soul techniques were far superior, and with the reverse heaven technique of burning his soul, there was no comparison between this world and his. Interesting. This Ghost Emperor's soul attack likely stems from its inherent characteristics, a natural secret technique. Jian Wushuang's heart stirred as he realized that this Ghost Emperor's consciousness had only just formed. For a newly formed consciousness to already wield soul attacks, it must indeed be a natural secret technique. This Ghost Emperor could be considered an innate being. But to be born so powerful, wasn't the one who set all this up afraid that the Ghost Emperor would become uncontrollable? Just as this thought crossed Jian Wushuang's mind, he sensed a familiar aura within the range of his thought power. His figure vanished from the city wall in an instant, and he transmitted a message to Xianxia, instructing them to leave the city and find Wei Jiuxian outside. That place was much safer than Mongshan County's city. Furthermore, he had just discovered that the slain cultivators, even after their souls were destroyed, left behind intact bodies. But as soon as that familiar aura appeared, those bodies instantly turned into blood water. The blood water flowed through the cracks in the ground, seeping into the earth. Found you! Jian Wushuang moved swiftly, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. In a dilapidated house in the southern part of the city, he dove into the courtyard well. The aura emanated from that location. Even the two-peak god phase experts above hadn't noticed it, as the aura was masked by the Ghost Emperor. It would be hard for an ordinary person to detect, but Jian Wushuang had meticulously burned his thought power to cover every corner of the city, waiting for this moment. Sure enough, the opponent had exposed a flaw after the Ghost Emperor appeared. With a splash, he plunged into the well, following the aura as he descended deeper and deeper. He could detect the opponent, but the opponent had no idea of his presence. Thought power burn. Jian Wushuang burned his thought power once again, completely concealing his aura.